G'day viewers and welcome everybody to the Ordinary Council meeting of the Moyne Shire at 2 p.m. Tuesday the 5th of October, held via online means. I will begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to their elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today and watching today. Recording of council meetings. Please note that today's meeting is being video recorded. This recording will be uploaded to council's website and will be accessible by the general public. By participating in and addressing those present at the meeting, you consent to any information you disclose, including personal or sensitive information, being recorded and uploaded to the website. I'll now read the prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech your blessing on the council. Direct and prosper its deliberations for the welfare of the people of the Moyne Shire. Amen. We have no apologies listed for today. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest for any item on today's agenda? Anyone would like to share at the beginning of the meeting? No, thank you. Confirmation of the previous minutes. Do we have any queries before I'll seek a mover on them? Thanks. Any queries on the previous minutes for the ordinary council meeting held on the 7th of September, but also the special council meeting held on the 14th of September? No queries. In that case, I'll seek a mover for both of those, please. Councillor Purcell's moved. Councillor Foster seconded. Councillor Purcell.
I believe that they're a true reflection of the contents of the minutes. I mean, of the meetings. So I'm more than happy to move.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Nothing further to add. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, councillors, all those in favour? Those minutes have been carried 7-0. I'll now pass over to Mr Millard to extend a welcome to a new member of the team.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, officers, I did want to introduce Ms Edith Farrell, who's joined us in the role of Director, Infrastructure and Environment. Edith's previously worked at Glenelg in the role of Director. Really pleased to welcome her to the team and look forward to her contribution to Moyne Shire in the future. So thank you, Mayor, and welcome, Edith.
Thanks, Mr Millard, and welcome Ms Farrell to the team at Moyne. Okay, we'll now move on to the next part of the agenda, which is public participation. We have one listed for today, Mr Brian Bellman. So there is guidelines around public participation. You'll have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes, and councillors will then have the opportunity to ask some questions of you. And we will get underway now, if you like. So hand it straight over to you, Mr Bellman.
Yeah. How's it going, everybody? I'm just wondering why there's a reason for these trees to be moved. What we've done there over the years, as a lot of people realise, we got rid of all the bracken, the boxthorn, hawthorn bushes, blackberries, cleaned up all down past the property. And as you can see, I'll show you some photos soon, there's still a lot down further, which I did ring up about mine to move back because I couldn't see backing out, but I've since cut them back myself as well. And we're trying to beautify the area, and everyone that's had a look, everyone's very impressed the way it's come up. And I just want to know the reason why that council would like them removed, because Moyne Shire themselves, they actually put trees in nature strips all around the district at their cost, and I've done all this myself. And we can't see that they're causing any problems. They're 60 metres back from the corner. There's no water flow that goes past my place because the only bit of drain that's there is what we've actually put in. The only water that lays in there is a little bit of top water that comes down. There's no flow on effect that runs through there. Now, the rest of Ibbs Lane, as I said, I'll show you these photos shortly. From downwards, there's gum trees, there's rubbish. It's just, you know, it's just really does need a good clean up. And put this way, if everyone cleaned it up, it was nice, it'd be a beautiful road to drive down. But now I rang up about the trees when I got the complaint, and I was told that they had to be Indigenous species. Moyne only put Indigenous species in, but Moyne Shire, I've had a look around. We've got a heap of Indigenous species and they're just a mess. And we've also got non-Indigenous species. For instance, Port Fairy's full of Norfolk pines. We've got walnut trees. We've got same trees as I've put in, the ornamental pears, which aren't a very wide tree. Sometimes if they really go well, they might get to 4 to 5, but usually about 3 to 4. That's about the height they get. And I maintain all this. I actually cut right to the corner, which is, just to keep it neat. And it's a lot safer. And there's no blockage from the intersection. People can see what's coming as clear as a day. All the neighbours haven't got a complaint. I've spoke to them about the trees. Everyone thinks it's great. So I'm just wondering why, there's a reason for them to come out. I'll just show you some photos.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Bellman. You whacked them up. And in the meantime, I'll just alert everyone that Mr. Bellman's speaking to item 17 on the agenda, which is a motion regarding the trees in question. Back to you, Mr. Bellman.
Can you see those photos there at the moment?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Okay. Now this is down Ibbs Lane from my place. That's item 1. Oops, hang on. Didn't want to work. Sorry. There we go. That's more of what's so-called. That's what is blocking the drains, and all this here. This is all Ibbs Lane, and this is only minor photos. That is up the top end of Ibbs Lane. There's actually gum trees growing right in the middle of the drain, and they have been known to fall over the road. That's them again there. Through here. That is partly of what was taken out at my place. That's what it was like that, and this. And there again, that's the back of it. This is all down Ibbs Lane. That's what we've replaced it with. And as you can see, it's kept neat. And as I said, I don't expect Moyne Shire to maintain it. I do it all myself. And if anyone's driven past, they'll notice I'm a bit of a clean freak with keeping the place looking nice. And we get plenty of comments about it. And them trees behind them ones, that's what we removed as well. And I've actually cut them back a bit so we can see backing out the drive. So and just that there. Now, another little question I'd like to ask while I've got council there. And that's the one that's as far as the last tree is there behind that sign, 60 metres from the corner. As you can see, it's not blocking any view from the main Caramit Road. Now, these are trees that were planted over at Koroit at the old railway station. And I saw them and they actually look fantastic, really good. And there's just a few photos I took of them. Anyway, after we got objections, I come past there the other day and that's what's there now. They've all been removed. And I don't see what is going on there, but one minute they're there like that. And as I said, and they were half mature trees. I know what my trees cost me to put in. I'd hate to think what the value of these ones were. But as you can see, they're there.
Thanks, Mr. Bellman. Mr. Bellman, we're at the 5-minute mark.
Sorry, yes.
Yes,
that's okay.
30 seconds if you'd just like to summarise.
Yeah, well, as I said, I just like, as far as I can see, we're not having any problems with anything with the trees. They're all looked after. It tidies the place up. I think they Moyne had something there a while back about residents beautifying the area, and which is what we've done. And I just think that if common sense prevails, you'll see. And I know we got intelligent people around us, so I just think common sense should prevail, and these trees should be able to remain. And if something happens that I had to pull them out at the moment, they would die anyway. I've already spoke to the girls at Pearson's nursery about it because they're in full starting to flower and leaf up at the moment. But if common sense prevails, I hope we can come to a good situation. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Bellman, for your presentation. I'll ask you to take your screen off share if you could.
Yep. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, councillors, do we have any questions for Mr. Bellman? Any council? Yes, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. Thanks for your presentation, and thank you for very clear summary, and appreciate the work that you've done on the side of the road. If you saying that the trees on the side of the road are an issue?
No, no issue at all.
With any of the trees, the existing ones or the new ones?
No, the new ones, there's no problem at all with those. It was the existing ones that the issue was. They were blocking, you couldn't see when you're backing out driveways, you had to cut them back. But these are a small type tree. There's no problem with that. They're kept back far enough. They do not block the intersection. And yes, there's not a problem at all with the new trees.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions, councillors? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Bellman. I really appreciate your presentation. It's cleared up a lot for me in a sense. But I'm just wondering, so just so I can understand what's happening here, the issue is that you didn't have a planning permit. Is that correct?
That's right. I didn't realise that I needed one because I was getting rid of existing and replacing with something a bit better, which as you can see, it's made a big difference to that part of the roadside.
It absolutely has. Yeah, it has made a huge difference. Did you contact council beforehand around cleaning it up in any way, or?
I had actually rang a couple of times. I'd rang about a few issues, and I think about the third time, just nothing seemed to get done. No one rang me back, and I do a lot of work for a lot of the guys that do a lot of roadside works with the chippers and all the tree lopping mobs, and I actually sharpen a lot of blades for those guys. So every now and again, when they'd pull up, I'd get them to give me a hand to take some out and clean it up. And there was never any mess. It was always cleaned up on that day. And I just got sick of ringing. I actually rang there a while back about the other ones. And when I spoke to one of the guys, he said, oh, we didn't get that message. So whether it's just bad communication, I'm not sure. But I didn't think that I'd need a permit when I removed existing that was there.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Bellman.
Thank you.
Councillor Dugas for the question.
Yeah, thank you. G'day, Brian. How are you?
G'day, Jim.
Could you tell us, is there any issue with the drainage? Because some of the councillors have concerns that the trees are in the drain and they might stop water flow, because I don't think there is any water flow.
No, there's no water flow at all there, Jim. What it does, up at the corner, all the water runs the other three ways. No water runs down that road past our place. And if you come to the intersection, you'll see about 20 to 40, maybe 50 metres from the intersection, there actually is no drain there at all. The only drain there is where we cleaned a bit of stuff out where the trees are. If anything, that's more or less said water the trees. So there's no water flow runs past that place. None at all.
Thank you.
Councillor Gleeson had a question.
Just a comment. Thank you, Daniel. Mr. Mayor. Brian, how are you?
G'day.
Brian, you're not the only person that's in this predicament. The neighbour on the diagonal opposite has been asked to remove some trees, and they've done so. Can you just sort of help me with the process of the approach by council, letter from council saying you don't have a permit? What are the reasons they've given you as to why these trees need to come out?
They're trying to tell me that they're against them, that that's not their thing, like not Australian Indigenous trees. And getting back to the lady up the road that took hers out, hers were a native bottle brush that she put in. And I actually spoke to her the other week, and the reason that she pulled hers out, because she felt very threatened by the letter that she actually received. And her husband was away at the time. And since then, I think they pulled some, and some of them did actually die, them trees. And the reason they put them in, because the drain, they have got drain there, but they put them back to stop the drain from falling in and, to consolidate the ground. But as far as the trees down our side, and she's another lady that said to me about it, she sort of wished she hadn't taken us out now.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Bellman. And look, I had a chance to, considering yesterday, and went out and had a look at the trees, and you have done a good job without doubt. It looks attractive. The issue I have is with roadside vegetation in general. Looking and growing up in an area where roadside vegetation was a huge issue. My issue is generally with roadside vegetation, and I believe that vegetation like that should be in a on a shelter belt on a property rather than on the roadside. So my issue is not the way it looks; it's really the location of it rather than the attractiveness. So I just put that as a statement rather than a question.
Mm.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, councillors? All right, thanks very much, Mr. Bellman, for your presentation today, and council will be dealing with this matter shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, Councillor Purcell.
And I move that we move item 17 to bring forward in the agenda.
Yep, thank you. All in favour? Yep, carry that. Moving item forward.
Seconder there, Mayor, please.
We got a seconder in, Councillor Foster seconded that. I'm coming to that now. So item 17, Councillor Dukes' notice of motion, and the motion reads that the Moonshire issue a permit to Mr. Bellman for the trees he planted on the nature strip in front of his home. Councillor Dukes to speak to the motion.
Yeah.
And then we'll see if we get a seconder. Oh, well, sorry, we'll get a seconder first. You move the motion, Councillor Dukes?
Yes, I've moved the motion. Seconded by Councillor Smith
Councillor Smith.
or Purcell, one of them, both of them.
Seconded. Councillor Dukes to speak to the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, you've heard from Mr. Bellman and you've heard what I've had to say about it. The notes say there's no interference in the drainage. Well, that's obvious, because if there was any, what was there before would hold up a lot more water and spread it out into the neighbour's paddock or onto the road, and the vision isn't a problem. And there seems to be an issue about the policy talking about native trees or indigenous trees. Now, if you go over the page and have a look at those photos, the very one on the bottom with those thin gum trees that are up the top end of Ebbs Lane, actually outside my paddock, should come past with a loader, shouldn't I, and knock them all over. Anyway, getting back to the fact, those trees are in the drain. The difference is they will continue to grow. If you have a look at them, being gum trees, the branches are already spreading out over the road. And I do, as Councillor Purcell alluded to in the briefing, have a problem with vegetation on roadsides. But having a 4 metre slender ornamental pear that's been looked after by the neighbour is totally different to having wild gum trees growing in the drain, blocking the drain, dropping leaves and everything else over the road. The fact is, either we support, as a council, a person who's doing the right thing with a tree that's easy to manage and give this person a permit, or we stick to the policy and ask him to remove those trees. And if he removes them and just leaves that drain and doesn't do any more work to it, we'll end up with what's at the bottom end of Ebbs Lane, full of suckers growing and continuing to grow. And next thing you know, you'll have a gum tree falling over the road, someone running into it, all because we're not smart enough to allow Mr. Bellman to have his ornamental pears. I mean, you just got to go for a drive. If you're really worried about trees on roadsides causing a health problem or a danger to motorists, go down Harry Goods Road where those young people hit that tree on the road. If there was ever a tree that needed to be removed, that's it, because the road diverts around it. Yet no one's mentioned that. Where are all our council officers? Did they go and have a look after the accident? But you hound some poor bugger who's doing the right thing. Not only him, but others would like to do it too. So I'm pleading with councillors to use common sense here and give Mr. Bellman his permit and thank him for the work he's doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dukes. Councillor Smith is the seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, further to what Councillor Dukes has said, look, I've inspected the property. I drove down there and had a look there a couple of weeks ago, and it looks pretty good to me. Look, I'd just like to see a permit issued for this because, you know, we've got trees over on the Warrendoo, Chatsworth Road and the Woodcutters Lane there that are shocking, but you can't compare the two. So I just think sanity should prevail, and we should look at Mr. Bellman's position. It's not going to obstruct the view. It's not going to block the drains. Yeah, we've got enough trees in the council gutters and that to look after without worrying about these. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This notice of motion from Councillor Dukas has caused me as a new councillor a lot of concern. I've been over, I've inspected. As a matter of fact, I went twice, and I noticed Councillor Purcell as well yesterday. I went yesterday because it was raining, and I took photos, and there's water lying there, you know, whatever the issue is. But the reason it causes me a lot of concern is, well, two things. One is that council adopted a policy in August at their ordinary meeting last year, which outlines what you can and can't do. So, you know, the policy is clear on, you know, drainage, roadside impact, etc., native plants. Now, we can talk about that all day as far as all the anomalies, and I agree with Brian, you know, Norfolk pines, New Zealand Christmas trees. I've made a heap of lists here. So there's a heap of anomalies there, and I understand that. But we're being asked to overturn a decision by our environmental officer based on the instructions that council gave him last year. Now, that causes me concern. Brian, I don't have a problem with the trees. The job you've done is fantastic. The fact that you did it without asking council, terrific. But my personal issue is that we put in place a policy, and now we're saying that policy doesn't matter. Let's just overturn it. So the quandary is, if we overturn this one, who's going to be on the phone tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is that it's, you know, the old common sense approach. I'm a big believer in common sense, but common sense doesn't mean that I agree with what you're saying. You know, common sense is a bigger thing than that. So I'm really struggling to support this motion, Councillor Dukas, based on the fact that council put in place a policy and now we want to just throw it out. So that's the quandary I'm in.
Thank you, Councillor Gleeson. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. This is so hard. Mr. Bellman, I think you seem like a really nice person and a good citizen, and I applaud any effort to make the environment, to make the community a better place. I think it's fantastic. But a little bit along the lines of Councillor Gleeson, I figure if, you know, the previous council must have had a reason and a rationale for putting that policy in place. If there's something wrong with the policy, then we should look at it, absolutely. But as it stands right now, there is a policy. And I think making exceptions is where we as councillors get ourselves into really hot water. And this is a case of where we'll be criticised if we do and criticised if we don't. But I just feel like the ethical thing to do is to apply the rules consistently to everyone, even though my heart wants to say, yes, let's just leave them there. It looks beautiful. You've done a gorgeous job. I just don't think in all conscience that I can support this. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Other councillors? Councillor Purcell.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be supporting it either, not on the basis of this one, but basis of it's going to be a very rare occasion where I'll be supporting roadside veg and the development of the increasing of roadside veg. I've opposed it for a long time, as Councillor Dukas has, and I'll continue to because I've seen the damage that it does. I think that such plantations are great, but they should be in the property rather than on the roadside. And I think Councillor Dukas summed it up in his final comment, and he said something like, others would like to do it as well. And I think that's the problem we have. As soon as you have, you know, one instance of, you know, setting a precedent, you have others who follow. And from my point of view, I can't support it. I'm afraid I can't support leaving the roadside veg there. So I'll be voting against this.
Thank you, Councillor Purcell. Any other councillors? Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I've been listening to the debate to help me to decide, because again, it's a really tricky one. I agree with pretty much everything that everyone has said, but I have to also go with the policy, because if I was to apply that it requires a planning permit, if we were to, go against that alone, where would that leave us? But appreciate the works that have gone ahead, and but I have to support the officers on this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. No, okay, we're good. Back to Councillor Dukas as the mover. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, we've heard about policy, but I don't think the policy excludes other trees than Australian natives. I think we're still able to, if we wanted to issue a permit to have those trees there. It's got nothing to do with roadside vegetation, as Councillor Purcell talks about. It's totally different. This is a nature strip in the township zone, and they're ornamental pears. They are not a problem. They're not like a gum tree. They don't cause the problems that Councillor Smith alluded to. The gum trees everywhere falling over roads. Councillor Purcell, no, go Bessie Bell Orford Way. There's trees falling over neighbours' fences, and if cattle get out, the neighbour's still responsible, even though it's the Shire's fault. Come on now, let's show a bit of common sense. Here's a nice tree to be managed, not just left to run wild, but to be managed by a person who wants to beautify his nature strip. The fact that I mentioned others might want to do it, so what's wrong with that? All they're doing is beautifying nature strips. No one's going to plant a tree that's going to be a problem. Some might ban shrubs, bottle brushes, who knows? But it's all to beautify the front of their houses. And we're in Marlers Flat now. So you're telling me you don't want Marlers Flat to look nice? You go to Port Fairy, you can find all sorts of trees everywhere. Overhanging fences, overhanging on footpaths. People having to come to the Shire to get them cut back. And here we have someone who's leading the way, and you're trying to say, no, it's not good enough. We can issue a permit, and we can issue them for those trees. Nothing's prohibited. I'm just relying on councillors' common sense here to do the right thing by Mr. Bellman and by the community in general, because the prettier the place looks, the better you feel. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Okay, councillors, time to vote on item 17. All those in favour? Councillor Dukas, Councillor Smith. Those against? Councillor Gleeson, Mead, Purcell, Foster and Lockett. The motion is lost.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, can Mr. Bellman be given his options from here on?
Mr. Millard, contact him, Mr. Bellman from officers.
Yes, Mayor, we'll take that on board now and implement council's decision with Mr. Bellman.
Thank you.
So can I ask through you, Mr. Mayor, is VCAT an option?
That's something we can have a discussion with Mr. Millard after the meeting about ways to go from here, if that's all right, Councillor Dukas.
We have Ms. Granger in our presence. Surely we could get an answer.
We can wait till after the meeting. We've dealt with that matter. We can move on now to item 1 on the agenda, back to standing orders, which is the monthly financial performance report, introduced by Mr. Ledden, who is the Director for Community and Corporate Services. Thanks, Mr. Ledden.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this financial report is for the first 2 months of the 21-22 financial year, comparing actual results against our seasonalised budgets. In an operational sense, it is early days, but I would just note that the annual rates and charges have been issued and the total revenue is recognised, but as we know, it is collected across 4 instalments. The capital works budget, there's an extensive list of budget variations in this report, councillors, that you've been through at workshop. There are items that were budgeted for in the last financial year, in 2021, but were not completed. So the unspent balances of those items are rolled forward each year to the new financial year. So quite an extensive list of carry forwards that are included in the recommendation. And just a couple of comments, councillors, regarding the investment portfolio, you will note that at times the actual holdings are different from the policy guidelines. And what occurs there, when investments are placed, they do comply, but as other investments are redeemed, the total holdings means that the percentages for each category can change across time. So that is permitted per the policy, but I would just make that comment, councillors. And all in all, councillors, we do remain in a strong financial position, and we are working our way through COVID. And I think, touch wood, last financial year, hopefully this financial year, that they are not significant impacts on the council businesses. But we'll see what unfolds as hopefully we come out the other end of the pandemic. So happy to take questions, Mayor, on any item, but the recommendation is that the finance report, including that long list of carry forward variations, be approved.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Do you have any questions, councillors? Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Ledden, on page 3 of 31, under the indicators, from the adopted budget to the updated budget, considering we're so early in year, there's some significant differences in the first parts of those, like the operating surplus, cash from operations, cash from investments, etc. Can you just explain why there are such significant differences this early on in the year?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Purcell, and through you, Mayor. That's a good observation, and it's a good result for our council and community, Councillor Purcell. The main reason for those early changes are that our council, like many, has been the recipient of the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program, or COVID recovery monies, mainly from the federal government. So, for instance, last month in round 3, council was successful in being allocated $5.4 million. That revenue is therefore recognised in the operating statement, and therefore the surplus goes from around $1 million to around $6 million. That's the principal driver. But I think the beauty around that, and what you've highlighted, is that the capital works program for our council in a normal budget cycle sits at around $15 million. Already, with that additional $5.4 million, and with the carry forwards, and a number of those carry forwards are based around round 2 funding from that same program, we are now looking at a capital works program of around $30 million, principally to deliver additional infrastructure works for our communities across Moyne Shire, which I think is great news.
Mr. Ledden. Councillor Gleeson with a question.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I was actually nodding that it was great news, but I do have a question. Mr. Ledden, that is fantastic that we double our capital works, which is awesome. Have we got the capacity to do it, in the sense that in your attachment forward with the variations, Mr. Ledden, there are a lot of things carried forward, and I know that COVID is a key factor, so projects are delayed or works have not been undertaken. So what's our capacity now to move forward with those projects?
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, very good question, Councillor Gleeson, and I think that's a key focus of the executive going forward, as it has been last year. And COVID has implicated the delivery of lots of service programs and infrastructure projects, and it will continue to do so for a little while yet. As we all know, outbreaks, shutdowns. We had a Ballarat contractor recently working on the Port Fairy Children's Services Centre as just one example. The limitations on construction sites, and on it goes. So it will continue to impact for a little while. What the executive and the senior management team are focused on is looking at how and what additional assistance we need resource-wise to deliver that program. But you're right, it will be challenging, and we probably ask for people to understand that some projects won't meet the timelines for that very reason. But again, we're looking at another $30 million program for the second year in a row. So whilst challenging, we did make some inroads into our capital works program last year. The carry forwards probably look a little worse than they would have if we hadn't been successful in receiving some of the federal government's impetus infrastructure funding.
Thank you, Mr. Ledden. Other questions, councillors? Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Ledden, on page 7 of 31, reconciliation of cash and reserves. You've got it?
Yep.
Okay. So the balance at 30 June 21 was 22, nearly 23 million. The adopted budget for 22 was 8 million, round figures. Correct?
Correct.
Yet the updated budget, which is only, what's this, June, July, August, September, 3 months old, has 24 million. So are you telling me we've chucked in the towel already?
Through you, Mayor. Good question. I will take it on notice. I don't know offhand how the 24 is calculated, but I'm
assuming that's profit and carryovers, or cash at hand and carryovers.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't know that we've chucked in the towel. So I think we're being still quite ambitious with our capital works program, Councillor Dukas. But I will come back to you on that one.
Okay. Well, you can blame Councillor Purcell because he asked questions, and I went back through everything to find one. Sorry about that. Anyway, you'll get back to us next week at the workshop.
But it does reinforce our strong balance sheet.
It does. You bet.
All right. Other questions for Mr. Ledden? Councillor Purcell.
On the financial performance report on page 19 of 31, and it may not be in your directorate, but the East Beach landfill grant, a significant amount of money been sitting there for a long time. I understand there's been some issues in getting approval to do that work. Are we still looking at the option of removing all of the old material from the old tip site, or is that off the record, off the cards at the moment?
Okay.
I think the CEO might respond to that one through your Mayor to Councillor Purcell, but as we did know, there was a long approval process pending for that project.
Mr. Miller, I'd like to add anything?
No. Mr. Gibson, yep.
Mr. Gibson. Comment on the East Beach rock wall.
Yeah,
sorry,
so,
East Beach tip. Sorry.
Yep, so thank you through you there. The current approval process requires us to look at removal as an option, because approval for a rock wall won't be granted until all options have been considered to make sure that that is the most appropriate option. So it is on the table and it is being considered.
Thanks. Other questions for Mr. Ledden on item 1? Okay, I'll seek a mover for item 1, please. Councillor Gleeson has moved, and that is seconded by Councillor Purcell. Councillor Gleeson to speak to the motion, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Mr. Ledden for your presentation. You know, it's important that we get these monthly updates, and what's great about it is with our different levels and variances of knowledge in relation to accounting practices, we look at different things and we pick up different things. And so, you know, the document gets scrutinised pretty thoroughly every month. And I'm just pleased that one of the comments recently or just before was that, you know, we are in a strong and robust position, and I congratulate the finance people for that. So I'm happy to move that we accept this report.
Thank you. Councillor Purcell, seconder.
I'll just echo those remarks. Very strong position, and it's a pleasure to be in a council that is in such a strong position, because there are a number throughout the state who really don't have the same financial resources and back and strength that we do have. So I congratulate everyone involved.
Thank you. Any other councillor would like to speak to this motion? All right, Councillor Gleeson is the mover.
No need, Mr Mayor.
Councillors voting on item 1, all those in favour? And the motion is carried 7-0. Moving on to item 2, which is the Moyne Shire Council Plan 2021 to 2025, to be introduced here by Mr Kevin Ledden, the Director of Corporate Community Services. Thanks, Mr Ledden.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, councillors. This report presents the Moyne Shire Council Plan for 2021-25 that you're well aware of. And it's a major piece in the Local Government Act Strategic Framework jigsaw. As you are well aware, there's been significant processes and community engagement put in place over the last only 9 months, really, since you were elected late last year. And to think that in that relatively short period of time, you initially adopted the community engagement policy. That was one of the early pieces in that Local Government Act Strategic Framework jigsaw. That policy guided the community engagement around a whole range of high-level strategic document and processes for the council. And each of the 79 councils in Victoria has gone through the same process. You know that community panels, online surveys, a significant range and piece of community engagement has taken place. Firstly, for a community vision, first time ever adopted in the Moyne Shire, which is a whole of community document, as you understand. Even though it is adopted by council, it is a community document. The next piece in the jigsaw and your most significant strategic document is the council plan, setting out a whole range of information, aspirations, pillars, targets for your term of council. So there's a significant body of work that's gone into producing this document. It has worked its way through to workshop and a previous council meeting and was then placed out on final public notification and for any comments. 9 submissions were being received in relation to that, and we thank everyone for their submissions and the time and effort. Each of those submissions are addressed and responded to in the attachment to the report. And varying responses of nothing required or amendments within the actual council plan. So probably the end of the line for a significant piece of work for your council plan. This is a council document, not a community document, and really guides council in what it wants to achieve across a whole range of areas over the 4 years term of council. So I'm happy to take any more questions on it, Mayor, but the recommendation is that council adopt the Moyne Shire Council Plan 21 to 25 in accordance with Section 90 of the Local Government Act. And we note that it is also within the required timeframe of the 31st of October. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Ledden. Are there any questions firstly, councillors? Yes, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr Ledden, just a great document, a power of work. Really excited to see it come to us today in its final form. Could you tell us what happens with it here? It would be an awful tragedy for this to go and sit on a shelf somewhere. How do we maintain a line of sight, and how do we align our work to this council plan in a more operational sense?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Foster, and through you, Mayor. So, yeah, that's a really good question. And, we don't want to lose and waste all of that great work. So the next piece of work that is occurring right now is the action plan and the reporting framework back to council and therefore the community on this very council plan. So all of those targets, et cetera, under the 4 pillars will come back in a reporting format to council. So this will obviously be posted on the website and be made available publicly, but the accountability bit under the plan is the next important piece of work.
Thanks. Any other questions? Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr Ledden, this has been fantastic to watch this process. We talk about, community involvement and our responsibilities to community. In my short time, this has been a fantastic example of community involvement and them telling us this is the direction we want you to take. So just the old pub test, Mr Ledden, is there anything that may come before council in the years to come that we can't refer to this document? You know, like, I think it's that thorough. Is there anything you can think of that isn't covered in this document?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Gleeson, short answer is probably no. That's only my opinion. There's been a lot of feedback and input from a whole range of stakeholders, community, etc., and then the council yourselves in getting to this point in time. So there's a lot better minds than mine out there and amongst you. And I would think if you go through this document, it would be hard to think of anything at the moment you couldn't hang a hook under in the future. But also just a reminder that this document is reviewed annually and will be replaced in 4 years' time. Things do change and evolve quickly. Look at a pandemic. But I think it's a really good spread of issues, services, needs, aspirations for our communities. And if you look at the submissions, the 9 submissions, you'll note that the responses are directed back towards what's included in the current plan and addressed, albeit at a high level, because it's a strategic document. It's not down to the detailed level.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Ledden? Councillor Dukas?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Ledden, I've searched through the document, but I can't find anything to do with fire reduction burning or asset protection burning. You talk about coastal this, coastal that, the whole thing's all about the coast and the townships, but I can't find anything where it says, you know, we should partner with the CFAs and other groups to reduce the amount of fuel in the bush, people's property, roadside vegetation clearing, all that.
Yep, through you, Mayor. Would have to go and have a look myself, Councillor Dukas. On the journey we've got to this point in time, I haven't heard that raised before, so happy to take it on notice and see where that's referenced back through. It won't, and again, it wouldn't be in the detail, but Mr. Gibson and I'll have a look at how that's linked back up under environment or whatever part of the pillar.
That'd be great, thank you. It just dawned on me reading through it for the 3rd time. I just could not find it.
All right, thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Purcell.
Thank you, Mayor. Take Mr. Ledden to page 7 of 18 in the financial plan and the chart there.
Councillor Purcell, we're on item 2. Yep. Council plan.
Yep.
That's where you're going?
Sorry, where am I? Yeah, yep.
Yep. So what page are we talking?
7 of 18.
No.
7 of 18.
Yeah.
Sorry, through you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Is Councillor Purcell on the financial plan, which we're just still stuck on the, not stuck on, we're on the council plan.
Sorry, I will take that back then.
That's all right. We'll come to that one shortly.
Councillor Purcell, you'll get first.
No, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you'll get first question in item 4 when we get there.
Apologies for that, Mayor.
No problem. Any further questions on item 2? Being none, I'll seek a mover, please. Yep, Councillor Foster has moved and then seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Foster to speak to the motion, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've seen this plan numerous times and numerous iterations, and today is the final step in a very long process. It's the first time that we have undertaken this particular process, and like all firsts, I can see it's taken a lot of time and energy, both on the part of our community and our team. And it's a good time for me to acknowledge Fiona Davey and her team for the work that she's done on this over several months. I have said this before, but I'll say it again. As a councillor, I can find my way into this document. It's sort of it feels like a living document. I know that's a bit of a twee statement, but it does feel like something that we can refer to frequently and come back to. Lots of things can link to this. So I just want to acknowledge again the input from all of the people who gave their time to be part of the panel, the engagement panel, and all of the people who made submissions. I hope that they can see their fingerprints all over this, and hope that they know that they've played an important role in shaping our community. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Councillor Smith. You're on mute there, Councillor Smith.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. Very thorough explanation by Mr Ledden, which explains it even more thoroughly to us. It's for the term of this council, and it's a great document to give both council and councillors some direction for the coming up 4 years. And a very special thanks to Ms Fiona Davey for the work she has put into this. I recommend a motion.
Thank you. Any other councillors would like to speak to this motion? Yes, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Agree with the comments thus far from Councillor Smith and Councillor Foster. Really, again, want to really thank everyone that participated. There's some just phenomenal and real exciting kind of aspects to the council plan. It's the best one I've seen since I've been on council. It's fantastic. There's really good diversity within it. And Councillor Doukas, I actually found something that might answer your question before about in the environment regarding strategic objectives. Partner with community, environmental agencies, traditional owners, land and asset managers, and other communities of interest to develop local and regional leadership on environmental best practice. So that hopefully can help with roadside vegetation and things like that. And there's lots of kind of clear directions on many different issues. So I think it's, fantastic kind of work that they've all done. So really, again, want to thank Fiona Davey and everyone who participated. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Other councillors would like to speak to this motion?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Doukas.
Thank you. Look, it's a guide. I mean, we shouldn't read that much into it. It's a guide. I heard from Councillor Lockett, and I hate to burst his balloon, but with all those organisations involved, I can guarantee him nothing will happen. That's how you have all those meetings and no progress. But as I said, it's a guide. It's a good guide. And like all road maps, sometimes we have to, or when we come to a roadblock, we have to decide, do we spend all our time and effort trying to push through, or do we sit back and find another way around? And this plan will give us the opportunity to tweak as we go forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Doukas. Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I think it'd be remiss if in this part we didn't acknowledge the submissions that were made as well. It's actually great to have the community involved and see that they are engaged in the process. It's one thing for us and, as councillors and officers to do so, but to get the community engaged as well is certainly important. And to go through the submissions that they have, put a lot of effort into, I think it's a credit to our local community as well.
Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Any other councillor would like to add? All right, Councillor Foster as a mover.
No, there's no need for anything further. Thank you, Mayor. Just commend this to my colleagues.
Thank you. All right, councillors, voting on item 2. All those in favour? Motion's carried 7-0. Moving on to item 3, which is the Community Asset Committee's Activities and Performance Report. Officer's recommendation is listed there, and I'll ask Mr. Ledden to introduce. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, this report is in response to a requirement under the new Local Government Act, or the 2020 Act. So that, as you'll see in the strategic link in the report, the CEO must submit an annual report to council in relation to the activities and performance of a Community Asset Committee, in respect of which the members have been given a delegation under this section. So it's probably pretty procedural, councillors. It's our first attempt at meeting this new requirement. The report sets out the 5 community asset committees that we have, and the attachment sets out the annual report on their performance. So happy to take questions, but the recommendation is that council accept that report in accordance with the Act.
Any questions for Mr. Ledden? Yes, we do have 2 there. Councillor Gleeson, then Councillor Purcell.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Ledden, I know that we had a bit of a discussion around it, and it looks as though this is how we organise our funds by setting fees, etc. has council given any consideration to including in those reports documenting the contribution from council to each of those committees?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Gleeson. Yes, we have. So further to your raising that matter in workshop, and I think no doubt this template will evolve over time. So I think it will become a bit more comprehensive, and we'll bring that matter back to council workshop.
Thank you.
Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a question in regard to the setting of the fees. Do council have any input into that, or are there any limits placed on the committees for the increases or decreases in the fees?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Purcell, to my knowledge, the answer is no. So that, council sets its own budget and fees and charges and considers CPI and et cetera. I know we have a number of councillors on these committees, but to my knowledge, we don't issue guidance around the fee setting.
Any other questions for Mr. Ledden? Okay, I'll have a seek a mover, please, for item 3. Councillor Gleeson has moved. Councillor Smith has seconded. Councillor Gleeson, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm happy to move that we accept this report. It's something that has to be done. It is an important document in the sense that it's there to show just some of the other assets and community groups that we do oversee and try and work with. But it is important that the CEO be in a position to make sure that all of those facts and figures are before him, and that he can report with some good knowledge and information. So I'm happy to move this report.
Thank you. Councillor Smith is seconder.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to recommend that we accept this requirement under the Local Government Act. It's report from the 5 committees working under delegation. Shows us their list of fees and charges, and very good to see the Mortlake Recreation Reserve offering free of charge tennis at the Mortlake courts. So that's a good start. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? All right, back to Councillor Gleeson as the mover.
Yeah, no need, Mayor.
Councillors voting on item 3, all those in favour? Motion's carried 7-0. Moving on to item 4, which is the Moyne financial plan for 10 years, so 2021 to 2031. Mr. Ledden to introduce, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, getting back to the local government strategic framework, and if you look at page 3 of the actual financial plan that is in the attachment to this report, it keeps drawing us back to that very framework. This particular plan sets out the financial and human resources around delivering the services and projects that the council sets out in its council plan, annual budget really as well, I suppose. So we did have a fairly basic spreadsheet, which was our long-term financial plan. That's now morphed into this financial plan 2021 to 31. So full set of financial statements and human resources are set out in the plan. I think it gives good context around how council arrives at its financial position, operating, balance sheet, cash flow, capital works programs, etc., and the staffing that delivers all the services and projects of the council. So again, this is a new requirement under the 2020 Local Government Act. This plan is using a template that has been put out by Local Government Victoria. So you'd like to think again, like the financial statements and the budget, there's some uniformity in the way that these are presented across all of the councils, and therefore for comparability purposes. But quite a bit of detail in here, councillors. Always a number of assumptions underpin when you're looking at a 10-year financial plan. This will be reviewed, it will change, and it will be updated each year. But it forms part of that broader strategic framework And as you know, the annual budget is one of the most important processes the council does each financial year. This is a 10-year look and best guess at our finances and human resources. So I think it's another important piece of that framework. Happy to take questions, Mayor, but the recommendation is that council adopt the Moyne Shire Council Financial Plan 2021 to 2031.
Thank you, Mr. Ledden. Councillor Purcell with the question.
I'll ask the question in the right order this time, in the right part of the meeting. On page 7 of 18, Mr. Ledden, the assumptions and the table on that. You okay?
Yep.
Under the employee costs, from year to year, this year, next year, the year after, they dropped from 3.6 to 3.1 to 2.65. Could you just please explain the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Purcell, and through you, Mayor. So, Councillor, there's a whole range of assumptions there that underpin the financials across the 10 years. Best forecasts, guesses at this point in time when the plan's prepared. For employee costs, the only reason that dips down is that the current enterprise agreement for Moyne Shire concludes next year, and it's split across financial years. It's a calendar year. So the forecast is that that would reduce, and that's a best guess at the time. The current EA being 2% and $30, for instance. So that's the only reason that dips down, and then it continues upwards. And we know it incorporates the additional 0.5% ongoing for superannuation guarantee increases as well. So hopefully that answers that, Councillor Purcell.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ledden, do we have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mayor. So this is my first financial plan, as you know, Mr. Ledden, on council. Could you help me to understand how we maintain the flexibility, I guess, to adapt to whatever happens? Because this is a 10-year plan, and I'm going to assume that our community will look a little bit different in 10 years' time than it does today, particularly with COVID. I guess COVID's changing things far more rapidly than we ever thought would happen. So how do we maintain flexibility around this?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Good question, Councillor Foster. And I think probably the short answer is that we probably review and adapt our finances on a monthly basis, as you know, through the finance report. So internally, there's a monthly process of officers reviewing their budgets to actual results, and identify trends, and they turn into budget variations that you approve in the finance report. That's kind of the immediate. That then rolls into an annual budget process. So any trends or changes that are emerging should get taken account of in the annual budget process. I would see this and treat this as guidance or a framework. It's not set in concrete. So I think even more important to this is the annual budget process. And then other factors will inform the long-term financial plan review, this very document. And as you've raised, we don't know what growth factors might be in the future. There's an assumption made here. That translates into supplementary valuations and additional rating income. We know that's moving along at 0.5, 0.6%, which gives us some more capacity to service or to extend our services to new residents, new developments, etc. But I would take the view that it is fluid, and at a point in time, this is the best estimate of what our position looks like. I think it's also really important in this document and through our financials that council currently does and continues to keep an eye on its financial viability via those financial performance indicators that Councillor Purcell and Councillor Dukas have raised in the past. They are critical in council understanding its viability into the future. And I think that's probably almost a more important reason or take out of these sorts of plans.
Okay, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Any further questions for Mr. Ledden? Okay, I'll have a mover, please, for item 4. Councillor Dukas has moved, and they're seconded by Councillor Purcell. Councillor Dukas to speak to the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. It's called a financial plan, and the financial position of the Shire is a very important one. And I think that not only those that are on the Assets Committee, and what's the other part of the Assets Committee, Mr. Ledden?
The Audit and Risk Committee.
Audit and Risk Committee, and the councillors together with the officers need to keep an eye on this plan. It's put together by the finance team. It's an integral part of the council going forward. Although we can't hold every single dollar, you know, in that position to stay there through the whole term of the plan, it is a serious guide that we must adhere to the indicators in that plan if we intend to stay viable. And I'm a great believer in staying viable, even if it means that we don't do some projects, but to do a project and go into debt that we can't service, once you go into that unserviceable debt situation, there's no coming back. So I implore councillors not only to study this plan, you know, from time to time, but to support it today and to take note of what's in it and to ask questions every month at the council meeting when it comes up. So you've got an idea of where we're going and how the council is performing. So well done to all. Finance isn't an easy subject. It's not for me anyway. So I do thank Mr. Ledden, because I do ask some ridiculous questions at times for his answers. So yeah, I thank you all councillors to support this.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Councillor Purcell as a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Dukas has explained it all perfectly. He's done a great job, and there's nothing I can add to his explanation.
Thank you. Any other councillors would like to speak to the motion? All right, Councillor Dukas, anything further to add?
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors voting on item 4, all those in favour? Motion is carried 7-0. On to item 5, which is the complaints policy. Officer's recommendation is the council adopt the complaints policy, and this is introduced by Mr. Ledden.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and councillors. And not to bang on about it, but that Local Government Act strategic framework that we keep talking about, and the list is on my wall, and I just added up, there are 20 things that we needed to do by the 31st of December this year. We're well advanced down the list, and we're ticking a few more off today, and this is another one of them. So it's the complaints policy that is due by the 31st of December per the Act. So we're ahead of schedule. We did have a complaints policy, and what this report tells you is that we have updated that policy and taken account of some of the requirements of the Local Government Act, and also some of the best practice advice from the Victorian Ombudsman. I do note that we've included in the report the comment of the Victorian Ombudsman, who says that the 3 tiers of government, councils often have the most direct contact with the public. It is unsurprising that councils deal with high numbers of complaints. I don't think we go too badly, but what this policy does is sets out how clearly we deal with complaints, and so that the public understand how they're dealt with. And again, so happy to take questions on it, Mayor. But sorry, the other thing I was meaning to say was that it clarifies the difference between a service request and what a complaint is, etc. I'm happy to take any questions, but again, the recommendation is the council adopt the complaints policy Gov 40.
Thank you, Mr. Ledden. Do we have any questions, councillors? Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think it may be worthwhile if Mr. Ledden did explain to all involved the difference between a complaint and a service request, because they are often used intertwined, or they're intertwined. So I think it may be worth spending a few seconds just explaining the difference.
Mr. Ledden's on mute.
Back off mute. Thanks, Councillor Councillor Purcell and through you, Mayor, and I'll just take us to the actual policy. And what is not a complaint and exceptions? A complaint must relate to matters of the Moyne Shire Council. Council may refuse to deal with a complaint that is subject to statutory review, clearly separate. A legislation or act may take precedence with response times and processes. That's also clear in the policy. It's not a service request. And the example is, i.e. a missed bin. That's a service request, not a complaint. Reports of a hazard, not a complaint, it's reporting an incident, if you like. And it goes on, reports concerning neighbours, a request for information or explanation of a policy or procedure, that's a request for information. Complaints made under the Public Interest Disclosure Act, quite different and a different process. Legislative decisions, breaches of codes of conduct, etc., etc. So I think it is really useful, Councillor Purcell, in hopefully making people aware of what is a complaint versus other matters.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Do we have any other questions? Mr. Ledden, I've got a question. You mentioned there's approximately 20 items there that had to be implemented under the 2020 Local Government Act. Obviously take a lot of council resources and officer time to implement them. How much support was there support given from the state government who introduced, who enforced that Local Government Act? Was there any support from them to do so?
Through you, Mayor, to you, Mayor, none that's found its way down to Moyne Shire that I know of, Mayor. So look, to be fair, Local Government of Victoria did provide quite a few forums and support online, and some of the template documents. So I did say that a bit facetiously, but it has placed an enormous burden on some officers that were pretty busy anyway, to be honest, and throw in COVID. So I really tip my hat to our teams of officers who have addressed these. We've mentioned Fiona. Susie Cooley's done a power of work around a lot of these governance policies, and I'm sure I've missed people, but when you go, the assets plan is still to come, so that team's been involved. You know, just by December, CEO employment remuneration policy, workforce plan, recruitment policy, staff code of conduct, complaints policy, procurement policy. That's the last lap, but there's another 15 before that. So our teams have worked really diligently to meet all of our timeframes. We haven't slipped one timeframe out of those 20 things that needed to be done. So yeah, I think hats off to our teams, because in addition to COVID and trying to deliver a $30 million capital works plan, they have been very busy.
Agreed, and yep, well done to all the team. Agree with those comments. Yep, another question from Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can Mr. Ledden or Mr. Millard tell me, being a community-based complaints policy, what determines what policies go out to the community for their input and what don't?
Through you, Mayor, good question, Councillor Dukas. Often prescribed, so in the Local Government Act, for instance, or in our community engagement policy, is probably the short answer.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, I'll have a seek a mover for item 5, please. Councillor Gleeson has moved and seconded by Councillor Foster. Councillor Gleeson, go ahead, thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move that we adopt the complaints policy. I note that being an updated document, there's been 8 changes made to it, which means that highlights the importance that we continue to update, and it's highlighting the importance of the officers taking notice of things that need to be updated. Look, it's a management tool that we need, and the update reflects the changes in the legislation, as Mr. Ledden referred to. I've got complete trust in the officers to ensure that the requirements that they've put in place are meeting our needs. I congratulate Mr. Ledden and the team. It's an enormous burden, and I'm more than happy to move that we accept this policy.
Thank you, Councillor Gleeson. Councillor Foster.
I just echo the sentiments of the Councillor Gleeson and add that I hope that this particular policy doesn't get a really good run. hope it's not utilised too often. But yeah, happy to support it.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? All right, Councillor Gleeson, anything further to add?
No need, Mayor.
Councillors voting on item 5, all those in favour? That motion is carried 7-0. Item 6, which is the reduction to food and beauty registration fees. Officer's recommendation is listed there. I'll ask Ms. Michelle Granger to introduce this one as the Acting Director for Economic Development and Planning.
Mayor, there's legislative obligations on council and on businesses to ensure hospitality and beauty businesses are registered. It's an annual registration and it has a fee attached, as well as obligations to meet the requirements of the Food Act and the Public Health and Wellbeing Act. Income to council through food registrations is approximately $55,000 per annum. Last year, council waived the fee in its entirety with use of funds from the state government and the outdoor dining funds that were granted to us. In recognition of balancing the COVID impacts and the legislative responsibilities this year, it's recommended that a 50% fee waiver is offered. Renewals are set to be sent out at the end of this month, and as the fee is set as part of council's budget process, council decision is required to vary the fee.
Thank you, Ms. Granger. Do we have any questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. Ms. Granger, great initiative of the council to waive all fees during that turbulent COVID year. Was there any repercussions as far as with the fees being waived? Did that influence or affect communication between council and businesses, etc.?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Gleeson, we did have experienced some issues which actually receiving the required paperwork to ensure the registration was kept up to date. We did find, however, that our environmental health officers were meeting an increased demand to support our food premises, in particular with COVID regulations changing.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Granger? Okay, I'll seek a mover for the motion, please. Councillor Doukas has moved and
Thank
seconded. We have a seconder. Councillor Gleeson has seconded. Councillor Doukas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, a great initiative, as someone alluded to earlier. COVID's been a real thorn in the side of business. I'm being polite here, trying hard not to swear and say other things. However, back on the subject, we need to do what we can, and the council is in a financial position to help these people. The community knows that we've helped them in the past and others, and the community and the ratepayers are generally supportive of what we've done, and I'm sure that they will support us again with this 50% reduction. It's not a whole lot of money, but it's a little bit, and little bits count. Like, you know, a penny saved is a penny earned. So I congratulate the councillors and the officers in bringing this motion forward, and I'm sure it'll get full support, and the community too will support us in helping those businesses.
Thanks, Councillor Doukas. Councillor Gleeson, the seconder.
Mayor, thank you. Completely endorse Councillor Doukas' comments. You know, we've been provided with a roadmap that none of us can ever read. We don't understand it. This path out of COVID that our state and federal leaders are giving us, and seriously, you know, we'll all get lost if we follow that. But if we reach vaccination targets, there is a path out, and I think that you know, hopefully businesses will be back to somewhere near more normality in the second half of this financial year. So the 50% sits well with me, particularly because, you know, reminding businesses that for us to be able to support you, you need to provide us with the information. So I endorse Ms. Granger's comments earlier as well. I think that council have been very, very supportive over the last 18 months, and I congratulate all involved. So well done.
Thanks, Councillor Gleeson. Any other councillors would like to speak to this motion? Okay, Councillor Doukas as a mover.
No need, Mr. Mayor, nothing further to say, except that I might even consider a haircut.
Thank you, councillor Dukas. Okay, voting on item 6, councillors, all those in favour? That motion is carried, and another vote that councillor Dukas get a haircut. Carried again, 7-0.
No, I counted them.
Okay, moving on to item 7, which is the Hexham Wind Farm CC vacancy, community representative nominations. Ms Granger, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. So council runs a community engagement committee for the Hexham Wind Farm. We've recently received a resignation from an existing member, and we've followed our process to seek to fill this vacancy by putting notices in the Standard and letters to landholders in a 5-kilometre radius. We're in a position where you've had 3 applications lodged to fill this vacancy, and we now ask you to select a new member for the committee.
Thank you, Ms Granger. Do you have any questions firstly, councillors? Okay, I'll seek a mover then for the motion, and that the mover declare the nominated candidate. Councillor Smith. As the mover, and seconded by Councillor Purcell. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thanks. Find the mute button. Thank you, Mayor. Look, this position is to fill a vacancy through a resignation. Look, I'd like to nominate Mr. Jeff Howley as a member of the committee. All 3 applicants were excellent, and we could have picked anyone. But why I chose Mr. Howley was more of a void in the northwest section of the wind farm. So I'd just like to move that we nominate Mr. Jeff Howley. And the only disappointing thing was that we didn't have any nominations from the western side of the wind farm. But I'd like to move that we nominate Mr. Howley. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, as chair of this committee, I would certainly like to second that motion. I think Mr. Howley will certainly add to what is already a very strong committee. I'd like certainly thank Ms. Harris for her commitment over the time, and sorry to see her go. And it was good that we actually had 3 nominations for it, and they were all really strong nominations, which has made it really difficult to choose. But I look forward to working with Mr. Howley over the coming years with this Hexham Wind Farm. So, pleasure to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Purcell. Any other councillors would like to add to this motion? Councillor Smith is the mover. Anything further?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. No, I've nothing further to add. Thanks.
All right, councillors, voting on item 7 with Mr. Jeff Howley nominated. All those in favour? Motion is carried 7-0. Moving on to item 8, which is the Salt Creek Wind Farm Year 2 Bat and Avifauna Management Plan Report. Thank you, Ms Granger, again.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So council is the responsible authority for the Salt Creek Wind Farm. In that case, we both issued the permit and we are required to administer it. Condition 33 of the permit provides a framework for managing, monitoring and reporting on compliance with the BAM plan, or the Bat and Avifauna Management Plan. It requires a Year 2 report to be submitted that provides results on bird and bat management, and specifically reports on threatened and vulnerable species such as the Burrelgard, the southern bent-winged bang bat and other species. Irrespective of approving the Year 2 report, there are ongoing commitments under the BAM plan that the permit holder needs to meet. The Year 2 report's been submitted and reviewed by DELP, who requested that condition be on the permit. And they are the authority that have expertise in this area, and they've advised council that the report meets their requirements. The BAM plan framework highlights the need to report significant impacts and provides for mitigation. And this report shows that the BAM plan framework is working. In the case of this wind farm, we've had a number of grey-headed flying foxes hit by turbines. There are ongoing requirements to be met beyond this report, and this is reflected in the recommendation to council.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Ms Granger? Yes, Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. Ms Granger, we've had a bit of a discussion about it. I'm just, we're asked to receive and endorse. Does the applicant meet all our requirements, or are there things that we need to follow up? In relation to our the motion before us, does that satisfy us that all that they're asked to do has been done?
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Gleeson, the BAM plan has ongoing requirements that need to be met. In particular, the Year 2 report has highlighted the collisions and the impact on the grey-headed flying fox, and there are ongoing and further obligations that need to be met to meet that condition. So it may well be that you only receive the report at this stage and endorse it at a later stage once we've got further details about mitigation on that species, which we're expecting early next year.
Yeah, follow up there, Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. So on that basis, Mayor, I'd like to take out the word endorse, because I don't think we can endorse a document that doesn't satisfactorily meet the requirements. So I think it's good that we can receive the report and then and ensure that through Ms Granger, the outstanding requirements are followed up. So
thank you, Councillor Gleeson. And when we ask for a mover, if someone wants to move it, if they want to take on Councillor Gleeson's suggestion, that is for them to do when they move the motion. Any other questions, firstly, for Ms Granger? Yes, Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just in regard to, it's on page 133 of the report, the use of dogs for the detecting, is that a common practice in the, in detecting birds, Ms Granger?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Purcell, and through you, Mayor. The use of dogs for carcass searches is something that has now become the #1 common practice for wind farms and for scavenger hunts. It started being the human collection of that information, but it's found that using dogs is a lot more effective as their scent is picking up a lot more than what the human nose can.
Thanks. Any further questions? Okay, I'll seek a mover then for item 8, please. Councillor Gleeson has moved, and what's the wording of the recommendation you'd like to ask for a seconder for, Councillor Gleeson? You're on mute there.
I'd just like to take out, Mayor, the word endorse and that we received the report.
Yep. Do we have a seconder for that? Yep. Councillor Smith, the seconded. Councillor Gleeson to speak to the motion. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just reiterate that, as a result of this report, DELP are going to require some more information. We require more information in relation to things like, mitigating animal death, I guess, the works that are in progress, the measures that are taking place. So this is a real ongoing monitoring thing. And I'd like to just be able to ensure that through Ms Granger's department that those, particularly in Area 2, are followed up. So happy to receive the report, just don't want to endorse it.
Thank you, Councillor Gleeson. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. No, not a lot further to add. This assesses the permit conditions placed on the stakeholders there, and I just think we've got to follow through with the and check that all the conditions are met in this permit, because there's been quite a few deaths of the grey-headed flying fox, which is a vulnerable and threatened species, and I think we've got to be, as a council, very aware of this. And I support that we receive the motion, the recommendation.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillor would like to speak to this motion? All right, Councillor Gleeson as the mover.
No more. Sorry, Mayor, just to ensure and ask that the outstanding reports be followed up. Thanks through Ms Granger's department. Thank you.
Okay, councillors voting on item 8 with that slight change in the recommendation. All those in favour? That motion is carried 7-0. Thank you. On to item 9, which is the Community Engagement Committee review, and this will be presented today by the CEO, Mr. Bill Millard. Mr. Millard.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, for those councillors from the last term of council, we commenced a review in, it was probably around this time in 2020, of the major projects unit and the resources required to effectively manage our obligations in relation to wind farms. We made some adjustments to that in December and January this year, and part of that was accepting a recommendation that we review the operation of CECs. So the review was prepared and conducted through our communications and engagement team, and Jackie Neiman led that process. Jackie's moved on from our employment. And the review actually was quite specific. It targeted CEC members, wind farm companies, councillors and staff. Very good response rate, pretty well a full response rate as far as the survey goes. Individual discussions with Jackie in the preparation of the report, council workshop, and consultation with council on the proposed recommendations. And those recommendations are, as we see it, for to be implemented over the next 12 months. Bearing in mind that the review, its task really was to look at the effectiveness of CECs, the membership of CECs and the governance of CECs. That's really the three targets. And in my view, Mayor, I think the report fairly responds to those three targets. So happy to take questions, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Millard. Do you have any questions, councillors? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Millard, we all received some emails around this, and I'd just like to clarify with you one important point. This report recommends that membership is turned over effectively every 4 years in line with council terms. Could you just clarify for me whether that means a community representative who is a member is able to reapply, or are they precluded from reapplication after that?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Foster. There's no exclusion as a part of the recommendations or the governance process, Councillor Foster. I think the reason that's put in there is really to, both give people who are serving on those committees the opportunity to step away, and to enable other people who develop an interest or have an interest to put their hand up to join. And for the council of the day, as it coincides with the council term, we think it's fair that those two processes occur concurrently.
Thank you. Councillor Purcell.
Just to follow on with Mr. Millard in that regard, that would be the case with other committees of council, like the Port of Port Fairy and other committees, that they would spill and council would advertise and more regularly than not reappoint a number of the committee members?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Purcell, yes, exactly. You recall the annual meeting of council. That's where we also allocate councillors' roles and functions with different committees around the Shire for the term as well. So a pretty normal practice, if you like.
Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Millard, just some correspondence from Ken Johnson. I guess looking at the consistency across the board, that's up to six community members. And I note that, there are several with less than that. Are we expecting that, we would like to raise each of those CECs to 6 community members?
Through you, Mayor, that would be part of the recommendations we'd work through, Councillor Gleeson. And certainly I know through Ms Granger, there's been some CECs obviously that we haven't been able to fill all those positions either. So that's certainly the intention, that we have a consistent approach across the board.
Follow up, have you? Councillor Gleeson? Yep.
Just to follow up, thank you, Mayor. So to reiterate or be sure in relation to Councillor Foster's comment, nobody would be excluded from reapplying for their position. You know, knowing that I've been on community committees before and filling the positions is the problem. So as CEO, you don't see that there'd be any reason for concern that all positions are declared vacant every 4 years.
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Gleeson, no, I don't. But that's really, I guess, in the same way I responded to Councillor Foster. You know, my own experience, and I'm sure yours is, it's easier to get on a committee than get off it. And I think building in a point in time where people can step away and we trigger that process is a good thing. If people want to stay on, you know, I think it's normal that they, you know, should reapply as well. That's a fair thing. What we would do, obviously, in any of the recommendations, we would engage with the council on the way through as well. So if there were left field issues that popped up, you know, this framework, like all frameworks, you know, we can adjust and adapt as we see fit if we don't think it's fit for purpose. But that's what we're proposing at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Millard, I'm just wondering about the committee chairs. Will each one have an independent? Firstly, the term independent, I often struggle with what an independent chair is. Often it's just the person that agrees with your view. But in the observations, it says it is recommended that the chairs be regularly rotated through the groups to assist with this neutrality. But then the following recommendation is that the chair be appointed by council to each of the committees. So will that be one chair that will chair all the committee meetings, or each CEC will have a chair of its own?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Smith, if I understand the question, the debate around independence was whether or not you know, there was feedback that councillors should not be chairs, but an independent person should be a chair of those meetings. You know, that was probably I guess the feedback that, you know, weighed more heavily than the other way. So in our discussions, obviously through workshop, councillors to me remain of the view that the councillor should be the chair. I guess what we're saying is periodically, you know, it would be useful if we could move councillors around and perhaps chair a different meeting if they're so inclined. But the process in a governance sense will be, yeah, councillors will remain chairs of the council meeting, and that'll be determined by the councillors.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Dukas.
Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Millard. On the membership in point 2, you talk about 4-year terms. If a situation arose like at Warrnambool and you had 7 new councillors, who would then appoint these new members to the CECs?
Through you, Mayor, the council of the day, Councillor Dukas.
So they would rely on the officers?
I think they would rely on, yeah, probably on the officers' recommendations, but you know, generally that's what the council would do. I think, Mayor. I'm not sure what the point is, Councillor Dukas. Are you saying that we shouldn't have a 4-year term? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Yes, because as we've seen a few minutes ago with the appointment of Mr. Howley. I think Ms. Anne Harris resigned as she wasn't there that long a term. I mean, it talks about 20 to 30 years of the life cycle of a wind farm, but no one stays that long. And once they're up and built and operating like Macarthur hasn't had a meeting for 2 years. So the 4-year terms don't make sense, really, because at the end of 4 years, you could have even 5 new councillors on mine. They wouldn't know who was who when it comes to picking those members. and it would rely on officers, and then it could get a little bit tricky without me going too far with that.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Dugas, if that's your view, have you got another question?
Yes, I have. Could someone explain to me that one of the 6 community reps should be a host landowner? So if they're to be a community rep, the host landowner is restricted by confidential agreements, etc. How could they be a true community rep to speak freely about issues when they're obligated to the wind farm? Could someone explain how that happens?
Oh, thanks, Councillor Dukas. Through you, Mayor, if I can probably respond to that. Councillor Dukas, I think it'd be hard to argue that the host landowner is not a stakeholder with an interest in the wind farm. So I guess what the CEC's role is trying to hear from the parties who are engaged in that particular wind farm. Now, the host landowner might have all sorts of confidentiality agreements, as you say. That doesn't mean they can't hear the feedback from other members of the community or council, or issues that are raised for discussion. So in our view, the host landowner is a relevant stakeholder in a CEC committee.
Right. So,
Mr. Miller, do you have another follow-up there?
Yeah, I have, because what can that host landowner do if they hear this feedback? They can't do anything. Their hands are tied. So the question I'm asking is, if we've got two community reps and a host landowner, then only 2 out of the 3 should vote. Actually, wind farm companies shouldn't vote at all, because they're not community.
Thanks.
Unless someone can explain to me how that works, I'll be very interested.
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Dukas, I'm not sure how every individual CEC operates, but in a voting sense, or an ability to take a position, that they're advisory committees. It's not a matter of voting, it's a matter of getting the issues out on the table and having them discussed. So understand your concerns, but I think in my view, and council might take a different view, in my view, the host landowner has an interest as well as a stakeholder.
Okay, I've got a few more, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dugas.
Under governance, number 8, it says questions on notice should be raised 7 days prior to a meeting or deferred to the next meeting. My question is, okay, 7 days notice, well and good, but how long do the person asking the question have to wait for a response?
Through you, Mayor, I guess, Councillor Dukas, ideally it's as soon as possible. If the matter is complex or requires information from a third party, takes a bit longer. But it's a bit like sort of council meeting. If we take a matter on notice, we try and respond as quickly as we can. Ideally, certainly before the next meeting. That's probably where we aim to resolve it by.
Right. So someone still waiting for a response from 2 years ago isn't acceptable.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not sure of that one, but I'd be happy to have a look at that one, Councillor.
Okay, I'll bring that forward. Down that same page, feasibility or in construction, meeting frequencies, it's got quarterly. Now, over the years that I've been on there, we've had meetings as required. Some are monthly, some are bi-monthly, some might go 4 or 5 months, depending on what stage it's at. So why have we got quarterly in there? Why can't we just leave it as required?
Probably for that particular issue that you've raised, through you, Mayor. I mean, if we say quarterly and it's not required, then we can drop it. But I think that's a better approach, making that decision quarterly than just letting it run till it's required. It might never happen, as you say. It's really just trying to put a bit of a framework around it for guidance, Councillor Dukas.
So we can still have monthly meetings if needed.
Through you, Mayor, it's guidance. I guess the issue is what is requiring more additional meetings than quarterly, based on the project, status, if you like. So we would say in normal terms, in normal times, under normal circumstances, quarterly should be enough. That's just the view. And that view came through in the survey as well.
Okay, any further questions, Councillor Dugas?
Yes, well, quarterly doesn't help if there are, the CEC's main issues are to do with the wind farm being compliant. So quarterly doesn't help compliance at all. That gives, like the wind farm companies now have free rein. By the time it's brought up at a CEC meeting that they're not adhering to their permit and something's actually done, it's 6 months down the track. Just ask Councillor Smith about the road issues and transport issues at Dundonald. You know, 12 months later, they're still trying to work through them. So you can quarterly, get rid of quarterly. The other one was...
Sorry, Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Dugas, Mr Millard's happy to respond to that.
Yep.
Yeah, just I guess responding, Councillor Dugas, to the point you make around compliance. I think everyone would accept that the resources we've added into the energy projects unit, earlier this year have had an impact on compliance. In fact, we through that process appointed a compliance officer. So I think those gaps, we don't have to wait for a CEC meeting to deal with a matter of compliance. I think the ones that come up there are the ones that haven't been dealt with. So we are certainly much more progressive and proactive on compliance now that we have those resources in place.
So,
thank you.
Where's our compliance report?
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I'd like to see the compliance report because there's a lot of issues out there. The other one was number 9 under governance. It reads, the CEC nomination form is to be updated to reflect the new charter as per recommendation. So the recommendation you're talking about is recommendation in the agenda or recommendation 9 in itself?
Through you, Mayor. Good question, Councillor Dukas. I'm not sure on that one.
Because it's recommendation 9, but it's agenda item 9. So I wasn't sure myself. And not that it's a big deal. We know what we're dealing with.
I'll take that one notice, Mayor.
Okay. All right, someone else can have a go now. I'll give Mr Millard a spell.
Councillor Gleeson with the question, thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. Just in some of the correspondence has been circling, the CECs have been referred to as a Section 86 committee, which is actually a decision-making committee. Could I just ask Mr Millard or Mr Ledden for clarification, because I thought that had changed under the Act, and if it has, just briefly, could we just clarify the role of the CEC in relation to some of Councillor Dugas' comments? There's never ever been a vote on the 20-odd meetings I've been to, but clarification, please, from Mr Millard or Mr Ledden.
Thanks, Councillor Gleeson. Who would like to take that one?
Perhaps Mr Ledden. I'm happy to. Mr Ledden?
Yeah, I'll have a try and Mr Millard can mop up. Yeah, so through you, Mayor, Councillor Gleeson, yes. So under the new Local Government Act 2020, 2 types of main committees, delegated committees, of which we have one, the Port of Port Fairy, or community asset committees. The previous report set out the 5 community asset committees with delegated responsibilities. The rest of them, and clearly community engagement committees, are advisory committees, not decision making.
Thank you. Anything further to add, Mr Millard? No. Okay. Any other questions for item 9? Councillor Purcell.
With regard to the chair, can you point out to me in there where it actually says who and what the chair is?
Through you, Mayor, as in whether the chair is a councillor or not. I think it's unsaid, Councillor Purcell, that because if we were to make recommendations about an independent chair, then we would have included. Situation is currently that councillors act as chair. That situation is proposed to continue.
All right, thank you. Follow up there, Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, look, should it be included though, if that's what the intent is? I've been through it that many times trying to find out where it actually says who the chair is, because so much of the correspondence has been it should or it shouldn't be a councillor, and I just can't see anywhere it's referred to.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So we'll tidy that up, subject to the report being adopted, and be more explicit about that. But the intent is for a councillor to remain as chair of CCs.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just on governance item 12, I'm just wondering whether, look, I'm in favour of the 4-year reviewing it at the end of 4 years, but some of these CECs have been going 6 or 7 years, and I'm just wondering whether we should have a review midway through, because some of these could be going on at virtually another 4 years before there's a review. And I'm just wondering whether we could have a review of the CEC, say, midway through the council term, just to bring it forward a little bit, because if there is any inherent problems, would be best to try and address them now than look at them in 4 years' time. It's not a major one, but I just think we're going to be worth looking, because some of these have been going quite a while now.
So, Mr. Millard, I think the question was, yes, does it have to be 4 years? Can it be less than that?
You know, the timing's moot, Mayor. I mean, we're suggesting 4 years because it would fit with a normal electoral cycle. That's really the intent. You know, if councils had and you know, felt there were particular reasons why we should review one midterm, midway, that's always an available option to the council of the day, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions for the item 9? Yes, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. A question without notice, Mr. Millard, but some of the concerns that have been raised with me overnight by email are around the chair, and some people are very strongly of the view it should be an independent person. If we do adopt this and a councillor is chairing, and if a member of the committee had any issues with the impartiality or perceived impartiality of the chair, have they got any recourse? Can they take any action? And I know it's not in this document, but is there some kind of framework that they can work through?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Foster, while it doesn't contemplate that circumstance, the CCs operate on the will of the council of the day. You know, they make the appointments, the council will sit on them. I would think any fundamental changes like that or issues like that would be raised and dealt with by the whole council. That they are the higher body. It's an advisory committee to the council. If it wasn't operating appropriately, or the governance issues or whatever the issue was, I think it's really because officers per se don't have control. They're just supporting the committees. So like all complex problems, we'd bring them back to council, hopefully.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Miller.
Thanks. Any other questions? Well, any final ones? We'll have to keep moving shortly. But Councillor Dugas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Millard, is there any downside if we were to put this out to the community for feedback?
Through you, Mayor, you know, Councillor Dugas, while there's never any downside from taking community feedback, the terms of reference for this were very specific around the operation of CECs. So the terms of reference were the people who are involved in the CECs, and including the council, you know, the officers, the CEC members, and the wind farm companies. So, you know, people who are outside that area, you know, I'm not sure what input they would have. Would they provide advice around, you know, their perceptions of how the CEC operates, given they can't have those personal experiences of that? So it was done as a review for a specific purpose, to have a look, as I said, at the governance, of the efficiency of the operations of the CEC. So broad community consultation wasn't contemplated as part of the terms of reference.
So,
yes, Councillor Dugas.
I still think it should. I'm looking at the council plan, and it says community and stakeholder engagement and consultation is genuine, informed and responsive. Well, I don't think we've done that with this review.
Okay, yep, that's your view.
It should go out to the wider community, not only the CECs, but to the wider community, because wind farms are a very topical issue and it affects people in all walks of life. And I reckon, to be fair to everybody, to the whole community, whether they live anywhere in a wind farm or not, and as you know, in planning issues, people from anywhere in Australia, like the petition for the dogs on the street, we've got people from other parts of the world having their 2 bobs worth. I think
Thank you. Councillor Lucas, if that's your view, we're in the question stage.
Well, I think we should. If you can give me a reason why it shouldn't, I'd like to hear it, but in good governance, it should be put out there for a month.
Mr. Miller, you just asked and he explained an answer. So do you have any further questions for Mr. Miller?
I'd like an answer that a yes, no answer would be good, because that was a roundabout one.
Well, I think I'm happy to take the answer that was given. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Dugas?
No, not at this stage. We'll wait till we get a mover and seconder to see if they're willing to drop the membership, part 2 of the membership and part 3C to do with host landowners out of this document.
All right, Councillor Gleeson has a question.
Well, I have a comment, Mayor, that the CECs that I sit on have community representatives, that their role within that CEC is to talk to the community. The CEC review involved all of those people, councillors, council staff. So surely we can conclude that the community have been consulted through their community reps. So I don't think there's an issue there. I think what we're doing is losing sight of the role of it. It's a non-binding discussion committee.
Sorry, Councillor Gleeson. I'll take that as a comment. We will leave that part of the discussion there on the questions. We'll move into the actual motion now. If I could seek a mover for the motion, thanks. Councillor Gleeson has moved. A seconder? Councillor Foster has seconded. Councillor Gleeson to speak to the motion.
Thanks, Mayor. A review was undertaken. Recommendations were presented from all parties involved in the CEC. There's been recommendations made, and I'm happy with them. I've sought clarification as to ensure that those that are on those committees can continue to be on those committees, and I'm happy with that. I'm happy that community, through their reps, have participated in this process. So I'm happy to move that we accept that report.
Councillor Foster is a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think I've spent a lot of time on this, as we all have. I'm really comfortable with the 4-year terms. I think that makes sense. I'm happy that people can reapply, just as we have to renominate as councillors. Keeps things fresh, keeps it open and not too closed to new members. I think it's really important that we have participating landholders have their voice in the room as well. I think, of course, they're a key stakeholder. And I think we need to keep in perspective that these CECs aren't, as has been said, they're not decision-making bodies. They're advisory groups. There's no voting right. There's nobody, we can't stack these in any way. And there's no intent to do that. Of course, there's not. So I think this is really just firming up some of the governance arrangements. I confess I did have some reservations about the chair, whether we did need to invest in having an independent chair. And it would be an investment, I imagine, an additional cost. And where would we source those people from? I think for now, I think unless people have specific issues with any of the councillors and in their capacity to remain independent, I think there's no reason why councillors shouldn't chair these CECs. So I'm happy to support the recommendation as is.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Any other councillor would like to speak to this motion?
Mr. Mayor, can I get a clarification, please? I'd like to know, the clarification is, are any councillors of the mind to remove under membership heading item 2, and the community and host landowner, item C, and or item C?
Well, I'll go, well, the motion's been moved, so I have to go to the mover. Councillor Gleeson.
No, Mayor, I'm satisfied that all those that sit on them will be able to stay on them should they wish. I believe that the landowner should be a participant. And so under Councillor Dukas' rationale, but they take the side of the wind farm. Well, there's 2 wind farm reps, 1 landowner and 5 community reps. I don't see the us versus them thing in the sense that we're running a committee which is purely non-decision making and there for information dissemination. So I don't see the need to change.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Gleeson. Any other councillor would like to speak to this motion? Yes, Councillor Dugas.
Clarification first, please. If a member on those CECs has a financial interest, whether as a host or a neighbourhood agreement, do they have a pecuniary interest? What's their legal obligation under the Local Government Act?
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Dugas. We had plenty of questions at the start, but I'll allow that one. Mr. Ledden might be able to help with that governance question.
Just on advice we've had in the past, Mayor and councillors, that those provisions do not apply to community members. They do apply to councillors on those committees, not community members.
Okay, that's the answer to that one, Councillor Dugas. Would you like to speak to this motion now?
Look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I can't support it in its current form. The 4-year terms that fall due at council election time isn't a good look at all. That's, if you want to stack a committee, that's how you do it. It's quite simple. You just got to look at the way it's formulated. You declare all positions vacant at council time. New councillors come on board. They don't know. They have to ask questions. A lot of them, and I've seen it with the new councillors there, they look to the officers for direction. And with the issues we've had from time to time with CEC committees and the relationship between them, the council and the wind farm companies, it is not a good way of going about it. So with that in mind, and the fact that host landowners who are bound by I suppose the words of their confidentiality agreement could serve no useful purpose on a CEC committee at all. If they wish to be there, then it's one less company rep. And the fact that, you know, as I mentioned before, feasibility, quarterly meetings, absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely. I can remember having monthly meetings. Sometimes they weren't enough because there was that much going on. People need to be informed. That's why we have these committees, to be informed so we can talk amongst themselves. We've seen the problems that Zoom meetings have caused. Things get out of hand, things happen that can't be rectified. So the way it's presented isn't the way that the CEC committees want it. I've been told by some of them they believe they've been hijacked in this. And as you know, we've got a lot of emails, and if they had time, we'd have a lot more. This only came out on Friday. I mean, if it went out to public exhibition, we had a month, you'd have dozens more come in with their opinion. And a variety of opinions. So as it stands, I cannot support this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thanks, Councillor Dugas, for putting your views across. Do we have any other councillors who'd like to speak to the motion? Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to, disagree with Councillor Ducas's comments, and happy to support the motion. We've had extensive consultation with various stakeholders, and as Councillor Gleeson and Councillor Foster have already stated, that it's about information dissemination. And to quote Thomas Jefferson, access to information, good information is the currency of democracy. So I think the committees are doing a good job. I did, appreciate the emails and concerns which come through over the last couple of days regarding the 4-year terms, and I, tended to agree with it a little bit, but they can just be renominated, and there's no reason why that hasn't occurred in the past, similar to our other advisory committees of council. So happy to support the motion as it stands. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support the motion as well, and I think it would be remiss of us if we didn't thank Jackie Neiman on the work she put into this. I know she's no longer with the council, but I know she put a lot of work into it and spent a lot of time with a lot of people. So I'd certainly like to congratulate her for the development of this this report and the recommendations. I think we've lost the intent, or losing the intent, of the community engagement committees, and it's a very simple process that the members are meant to be the voice of the community. They're the ones that the community go to ask questions. They get them answered and then they take them back to the community. I think a lot of this argument is really, you know, who chairs, how many members you've got, where they come from, loses the complete intent of what these committees were meant to be. And I think we need to get back to a bit of basic stuff here and just look at why we have them in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Purcell. Other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll be supporting this. I think it's given everybody a good opportunity to have their say. And I think Jackie Neiman did a good job in going around and talking to people. So I think it's been a good opportunity for things to express their views. And look, it is a working process and these things will alter over the years as they mature. But I will support the motion. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Yep, I'll just make a short comment in support and just like to thank all the community members who contributed to the survey with their feedback. Also the wind farm reps and councillors and council staff all contributed to this report. Obviously, when you're putting your views across in a group, not always your particular view, you know, may be adopted, but I think it's a good balance from all the feedback gained from across those stakeholders. So thanks for everyone for their input and thanks to the CEC community reps who volunteer their time on these committees. Back to Councillor Gleeson as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I hear Councillor Dugas' concerns. I believe that each of the CECs has an autonomy, that they should be independent of each other. There may be an opportunity where before council is filled the month before, being a 4-year period, maybe the membership of the CECs is dealt with, and I understand that. But I'm not a conspiracy theory. This isn't a scam, this report. It was done through the proper processes. I was very appreciative of some of the emails that I received because they highlighted their individual concerns, not group concerns. And I've mentioned a couple of those today. But I'd just like to say that we spent enough time on this and I'd like to move forward. Thank you.
All right, councillors, voting on item 9. All those in favour? Councillors Gleeson, Purcell, Foster, Smith, Lockett and Mead in favour. Those against? Councillor Dukas against. The motion is carried 6-1. Moving on to item 10, which is the call-in policy review. And we have our Manager for Planning here to present this, Miss Robin Olsen. Thanks, Miss Olsen.
Thank you, Mayor. This report considers the existing call-in policy that allows councillors the opportunity to make a decision on any of our planning permit applications. The call-in policy requires a process where officers prepare a short report, and councillors have an opportunity to call that report in they've got 5 days to call it in. If you wish, if the report is called in, the planning permit then is sent for a site inspection as well as going to a council meeting for a decision. The site inspection is arranged accordingly at this point in time with the applicant as well as any objectors. So the call-in policy at the moment, through the preparation of the reports and the council meeting cycle, adds approximately 4 to 6 weeks to a planning permit process. This proposal is to modify the policy to streamline the process and better target the types of applications that councillors have chosen to consider in the past. So the proposed changes, so the policy as it is proposed today, I should say, would allow the following triggers for a call-in to be offered to councillors, and that is if an officer recommendation is for the refusal of a planning permit, if there is the receipt of one or more objections, or at the request of the CEO or relevant director or manager. There is also a proposal that the site inspections that are undertaken as part of this process would only be attended by councillors and council staff. The recommendation is to adopt the new call-in policy.
Thank you, Ms Olsen. Do we have any questions, councillors? Councillor Dugas.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms Olsen or Robin, on page 41, in relation to multiple dwellings in the farming zone and the waiver of 5 or more car spaces, does that read that it's an automatic call-in?
So,
sorry, yes.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. So the current policy requires that those proposals that are multiple dwellings in the farming zone, or whether they've required or requested a waiver of car parking spaces, those ones are automatically forwarded to councillors. A report is prepared and forwarded to councillors for the call-in process at this point in time.
So you're requesting that they don't go forward unless there's a decision not to grant.
That's correct. So there are the reasons for the proposal is that the reasons for a call-in would be for the refusal of a planning permit application, for the if there's one or more objections, or if it's called in up.
Otherwise, otherwise you'll handle it in-house and we don't have to worry about it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Good job.
Further questions for Ms Olsen? Being none, I'll seek a mover for the motion, please.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Councillor Dugas.
Thank you.
Volunteers there, and a seconder. Councillor Lockett has seconded. Councillor Dugas as the mover, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, a nice little, how would you put it, tweak to the calling policy. It's been well explained. I've just had a couple of explanations done, and I think this will streamline the situation. Call-ins aren't banned, but a lot of times, and as Ms Olsen said, we get a delegates report, etc., a calling report, and we don't call them in because it's, you know, a permit to grant or it's to grant a permit, and as they said, there is a little bit of time wasted. And in that respect, even 2 weeks to make a difference. So well done to the planning department. Well done to, I was going to say Robin, sorry, to Ms Olsen. And I think the councillors in general would be happy to adopt this new calling policy. And I think the public in general will find it a lot easier to deal with. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dugas. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, just wondering if I could seek a clarification of Councillor Dugas, if he would support the motion being slightly altered to 2 or more objections. Sorry, I was trying to ask that before, but
no, look, I think one objection is all we need, because as Councillor Purcell alluded earlier in the day, it's not hard to get a couple of people to put in an objection if you want them to. And as we've seen, we've had one objection, I think, in Griffith Street that turned out to be a serious issue through VCAT, etc. Or I think there might be 2 in Griffith Street, and there were only 1 objection. But there are a lot of people in the street that were watching closely on the outcome. So I think one can handle it all right. Frivolous objections, I'm sure the planners will write back and say, sorry, but your objection doesn't hold up under planning regulations or planning rules.
Okay,
thank you.
and,
I think that's right.
Yeah, so Councillor Dugas, you're speaking to the motion as a seconder, or will your hands raised to express?
No, I've moved the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Lockett, I was talking to, and I said your name. Councillor Lockett.
Yeah, because you mixed us up.
Were you looking to second that motion, or did you have your hand raised to ask a question?
Yeah, happy to second. Thank you.
Would you like to speak to that?
I've got a jackhammer going in the background. I like to reserve my right.
You reserve your right. Okay.
Oh, hang on, it's stopped. I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry
You
about
got a
that.
permit?
The joys of Zoom from home. I've got a planning permit too. No one called it in. Yeah, no, we've fleshed it out at workshop and today and in the agenda briefing, and it's good to see that these policies are reviewed and we're open to developing and becoming the best planning team and shire that we can be. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Any other councillor would like to speak to this motion? Back to Councillor Dukas for summary. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, all I can say is it's a nice little tidy up, and going forward, it'll be hugely beneficial to all. Thank you.
Okay, councillors voting on item 10. All those in favour? Motion's carried 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Olsen.
You're on a winner, Robin.
Okay, item 11 is the Climate Emergency Declaration Response Update. And this is to be presented by our Director for Infrastructure and Environment, Miss Edith Farrell. Thank you, Miss Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report is basically just a progress report in relation to Council's Climate Emergency Declaration and a series of actions, priority actions that were developed in response to that declaration. So by way of background, Council declared that declaration back in October 2019, and subsequent to that asked for a report on the environmental sustainability strategy and the progress against that in February 2020, and then following that committed substantial funds to the Utility Efficiency Improvement Program for both the 2021 and 21-22 financial years, which was a demonstration of the importance of this particular matter to Council. So this report now is detailing the progress against the actions and also a forward action plan to carry the activity along for the next 18 months. Councillors will note that in the current action table, there are 9 actions that were initially identified. 2 of those have been completed, 6 are in progress, and 1 has not yet commenced. But they're all listed there in the report, and it's a dynamic action plan in terms of the ability to add to the activities and actions as we go forward. I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell. Do you have any questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. It was a question actually that Councillor Gleeson had raised earlier in the agenda briefing, and it was just regarding the amount of green energy. Sorry, here's the drill again. The amount of green energy which Moyne produce, and whether this will be included in our offsets that we produce.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to take that, Ms. Farrell, or?
Could I defer that to Mr. Gibson? Thank you.
Okay, yep. Mr. Robert Gibson, who's our Manager for Environment and Local Laws. Mr. Gibson.
Through you. Yeah, Councillor Lockett. It can be, yeah. So we can factor in that as part of our balancing our emissions with other forms of mitigation that we are producing as part of this program, and we can separate it out as well. So you can include them both and consider them in isolation or together.
Thank you. Other questions, councillors? Councillor Dugas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clarification, please. It says on the first line of background, the words declared a climate emergency. How long does a climate emergency have to last without any emergency happening before it's no longer an emergency.
Okay. Mr. Gibson?
Through you, Mayor, I'd suggest that as it's a resolution of council, it would be to council resolves it not to be an emergency.
Thank
Oh,
you.
well, I won't hold my breath on that one. Thank
Any
you,
other
Mr.
questions?
Gibson. Good answer. I appreciate it. So I'll have to ask the councillors now how long an emergency is before it faded away.
Councillor Purcell with a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. On page 48 in the summary of the actions, the installation of the 50-kilometre electric vehicle fast charger in Port Fairy, what is the location of the, I presume there's one identified things applicate the funding applications gone in. Is there a designated location?
Mr. Gibson, thanks.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, Railway Place has been flagged as a ideal location at this point. Close to shops, good parking, secure lighting, ticks a lot of the boxes.
Thank you. Other questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Dugas.
This is a sensible one. Sorry. Right. The person who undertakes these projects, is that the Acciona officer? I shouldn't say Acciona. Is that the funding we use from Acciona?
Yeah, so many of the projects described here will be implemented, at least in part, by the Energy Efficiency Officer. But there's other officers within the team that do contribute.
Okay, Energy Efficiency Officer. Thank you.
Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. Because of the resolution of 2019, you know, that means we've got to accept or show that we accept and respond to climate change to either the director or to Mr. Gibson. Have we added enough resources and funding to ensure that we can meet our requirements?
Yeah, Mr. Gibson, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're at a good start at the moment. I think part of the process of growing in this space is to explore what other opportunities are out there, and that's opportunities to do stuff, opportunities to obtain funding, do more, but also highlight where we might have a resource gap down the line.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, a mover for the motion, please. Councillor Foster has moved, and a seconder, please. Councillor Lockett has seconded. Councillor Foster to speak to the motion, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really happy to move this motion. It's great to see all of this activity in one place to get a sense of the momentum that has been generated from that climate declaration. I feel my sense is that this has been a time of getting our own house in order, and I'm really looking forward to what happens now that we've decided to become members of the Barwon Southwest Climate Alliance. I think that will give us access to resources and scope to be able to tackle things much more broadly. You know, Councillor Gleeson asked whether we've allocated enough resourcing. I get a feeling that we could tip our entire budget into this and not make a dent, but it's incumbent upon us, I think, to do what we can. And this is such a healthy, inspiring start. And I'm really proud of what we've done so far and look forward to what comes next. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Councillor Lockett, there's a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dugas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I will speak for it because a lot of the projects in here are just common sense things that we should be doing. A lot of the community do it themselves. A lot of the rural community undertaken sustainable strategies, water use, all that sort of stuff, greenhouse gas reductions with solar panels on their hay sheds, etc. And the fact that in the recommendation, the words climate emergency don't exist. So I hope nobody wants to put them in now. And saying that, you know, it's a good thing to do. The only thing I find or can't find is something about pollution. If one of the officers or Mr. Gibson, is there anything in this about reducing pollution? I know we've got the waste collection with the glass, etc., but general pollution around the community. I mean, when there's a an event on at the Civic Green, you know, there's just, people are just lazy. They drop their paper cups and their bottles, and some put them in the bins and they put them in the wrong one. Is there anything in here where we can, or maybe sometime in the future, we can look at some plan where we have a clean up? Is there a clean up of Beach Day in Port Fairy like they do in Warrnambool?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dugas. So you're in the part where you're speaking. Would you like that answer now, or are you happy to take that?
No, I'll take that on notice. I just couldn't find anything that was really specific to not only educating, because you can put out all the pamphlets you like, which is probably pollution in itself. But, you know, on-ground pollution is, I think, in your face all the time, and I think we should be doing something about that.
Okay, we'll take that comment and Mr. Gibson to note that for the future.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other councillor would like to speak to the motion? Alrighty, Councillor Lockett reserved, so over to you, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the comments. Yeah, I think that the climate emergency and climate change is, you know, one of the, I say it every time and I'll keep saying it, it's one of the biggest challenges that confront us in our lifetime, you know, and the pandemic has, you know, has almost put the issue to the side for a little bit, but we've seen some of the, you know, this year around the globe, some of, you know, catastrophic. Councillor Dukas was saying before about, you know, where's the emergency? You know, you just need to see, you know, the bushfires that are raging around, the, you know, there's snow in summer, there's all sorts of weird things happening, and they're talking about a 1.5 degrees, which doesn't sound much, but then the polar caps melt and then the sea level rises. It's happening right now. So, you know, a lot of the scientists are saying it's happening, yeah, much earlier than it was even predicted. So fantastic that what we have already done, but it's great to see that we're getting a systemic, strategic plan of what we're doing forward. And yes, Councillor Foster was saying before, the Barwon Southwest Climate Alliance is going to be fantastic to work collaboratively with others. Also, Natasha Mills, who is the Energy Efficiency Officer, she is fantastic and really knows her stuff. So it's fantastic that we've, you know, got someone in that space that's working on this. I won't say 24/7 because she's got to have downtime as well, but it's great. So yeah, really supportive of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Foster is the mover to summarise, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I think just in summary, I'd just like to remind councillors that climate and environment was really the number one priority on the list in the council plan we adopted earlier today. So this really ticks so many boxes for us. So I highly commend this, and let's put it to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillors voting on item 11, all those in favour? Yes, that motion is carried 7-0. Item 12 we'll move on to now, which is the Griffith Street footpath petition to be presented by Ms Farrell again. Thanks.
Thank you. So through the Mayor, this report is basically to deal with a petition that Council had previously received back in July, and it was tabled on the 7th of September to Council. So this is the resolution in relation to the petition, which was seeking the extension of a footpath along Griffith Street. It's proposing that a footpath is put to the budget deliberations for 22-2023 for the west side of Griffith Street in response to that petition.
Thanks, Ms Farrell. Do you have any questions firstly? Okay, I'll have a seek a mover for the motion, please. Yep, Councillor Gleeson has moved, and a seconder, please. Councillor Smith has seconded. Councillor Gleeson.
Thanks, Mayor. I spoke about this in workshop. I'm very, very familiar with it. I lived in the area. This is a gateway to Port Fairy, and it certainly it warrants some attention. And I'm happy that we look to put this into the budget considerations for next year.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm more than happy to support this because after our last workshop in Port Fairy when this came up, I drove along and had a look along that section. It was quite wet and there was water everywhere, and it was not a safe sort of area. So I think if we can progress this forward and put it into the budget deliberations for 22-23.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this motion?
Teach the
Councillor
kids to
Foster.
get on the right side of the road.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to say I absolutely support this, and I know that some residents might find it a little frustrating that it can't happen more quickly. There's a process behind it, but just hopefully they can be reassured that this is an important step in that process now, and it's on the books, if you like. So that's yeah, hopefully that gives them some comfort.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Any other councillor would like to add to this motion? In that case, I'll go back to Councillor Gleeson.
Yeah, no need, Mayor.
Councillors voting on item 12, all those in favour? That motion is carried 7-0. On to item 13, which is a petition and joint letter regarding the dogs and toy vehicles proposed local law amendment. Ms Farrell to introduce, thanks.
Thank you. So through the Mayor, Council at its meeting on the 3rd of August determined to seek public comment on a proposal to amend the general local law, specifically in relation to dogs in specific township area of Port Fairy and toy vehicles covering the period 24th of December to Easter Monday inclusive. The public comment was sought, and there's a petition now to be presented to council, which contains 1,455 electronic signatures, in addition to a joint letter of support containing 16 signatures. The purpose of the report today is simply to table the petition to council, and the intent is that the petition and the subject of that will be considered at the November council meeting.
Thank you, Ms Farrell. Firstly, any questions? Councillor Lockett with a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, am I correct in saying that we can't and generally aren't to comment about the petition? We're just to table it, just to clarify for those viewers watching.
Yes, I believe that is the case, as per normal practice. I believe there may be a suggestion that when it's moved, we might put a particular time frame on when it comes to council to give those viewers at home an idea of when it will be dealt with. Any further questions? In that case, I'll seek a mover, please. Yep, Councillor Lockett has moved and Councillor Purcell has seconded. Councillor Lockett as the mover.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will move that we add the addition of to November, the meeting, to give it a time frame.
Yep, okay. In item 2, consider a report on this matter at the November council meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, is that okay with you as a seconder, Councillor Purcell? Yep, okay. Councillor Lockett to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Yep, very happy to receive this petition and looking forward to it coming to council at November's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purcell.
Nothing more to add.
All right, that being the case, I'll put the motion to the vote. Item 13, all those in favour? Motion is carried 7-0. Item 14 is the waste services contract for 2022 and beyond. Obviously, the recommendation is listed there. Mr. Gibson to introduce, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report is seeking council approval to proceed to tender for council's waste services. This is the largest contract that council issues as an isolated item. So it's comprised of 3 components, one being the curbside collection service, the other being the management of skips and waste management at our transfer stations, and the third being waste collection from our caravan parks. The current contract, which commenced in 2017, expires in 2020. While it does have some extension provisions built into that contract, due to the variations that have occurred since this contract was executed in 2017, it's not viable legally in terms of procurement rules, and also it's probably very prudent to go back out to the market anyway, due to the changes that have occurred to this contract since 2017. So go back to the market and try and obtain a contractor or contractors to provide each of those three services. The contract provides for an initial 5-year period with options to extend up to a further 5 years in smaller or larger components. So it could be 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or the full 5 year for extension, but it can't exceed 10 years. And the current contract or the contract before council is largely the same as the one that we're operating under now, with variations incorporated, other than some extension to the areas that are serviced. So there'll be a further approximately 76 properties serviced under the contract that's on the table today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gibson. Any questions, firstly, councillors? Okay, thank you. I'll ask for a mover, please. Councillor Doukas has moved and seconded by Councillor Purcell. Councillor Doukas as the mover, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, a very comprehensive document. I'm very happy with it because, without saying too much, in the past we've had various issues with the way the documents were written, etc. This is very good. It's quite clear and precise. There are, I think, from what was Mr. Gibson said, 4 different contracts. Is that correct? There's the waste, the FOGO, the recyclables, the glass, and caravan parks. So would have been good to see them in the recommendation, but anyway, by the by. But I think, and the amount of time people or companies have to review this contract and put in a tender is very good. There's no need to rush. It's end of November, I believe. The community or those in the waste business know it's coming. So they're all sitting there waiting to get this document. And I think the terms in it that have been clarified with the 5 years plus the option of 5 years, whether they be 1B1s or 2B3s, it's all there, and the officers are on top of it, and they will keep us informed as we go forward. So I'm very happy to move this recommendation and look forward to whoever wins the contract going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Doukas. Councillor Purcell is the seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, this is the biggest contract financially, but it's probably also one of the biggest in the number of pages as well. It is a big document. Look, and we have thoroughly been through this through workshops, and councillors have put a lot of time going through it. So, you know, it is a big document, one we need to get right, and I think we have, and it's a pleasure to second it.
Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Any other councillors would like to speak to this motion? Okay, Councillor Doukas is the mover.
No, Mr. Mayor. Put it up and get it out to those that want to put a tender in.
All right, thank you. Councillors voting on item 14. All those in favour? That motion is carried 7-0. Moving on to item 15, which is the Audit and Risk Management Committee recommendation there to confirm the minutes of the June meeting. I'll ask our Director for Corporate and Community Services, Mr. Ledden, to speak to this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, I'll take it as procedural. All of the minutes of our Audit and Risk Committee minutes come forward to council for the information of council. Happy for any questions. There's a range of topics you'll see on the minutes that were addressed by this committee meeting. Otherwise, the recommendation, Mayor, is that the council receive those confirmed minutes.
Thank you. Any questions, firstly? Councillor Purcell. We just can't quite hear at the moment, Councillor Purcell.
Because you're on mute.
Some great work there too.
Thank you.
Item 16. It was good to see the council rated low risk in 5 of the indicators and medium risk in 2 of the indicators. If Mr. Ledden could just let us know what the medium risk ones were.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Yeah, very important. It probably ties in with the comments we made around the financial plan and the financial viability of council. So there are 5 criteria that the Victorian Auditor General assesses in terms of assessing each council's financial viability. Fortunately, our council in recent years has been given a low risk, which is the highest category, if you like, or the most sustainable. But the 2 categories that have drawn medium risk are the adjusted underlying surplus of council. That does take the operating surplus and eliminate all capital grant revenue that's recognised. Maybe a little harsh. And we did talk about at council and the audit committee about the book value entries for sale of assets, or really ripping up roads and replacing them. So you could argue the toss that maybe that's a little harsh. The other one is the asset renewal category, and maybe the criteria is a little harsh at 150%, but we've been above 100% for the last 4 to 5 years. And we do acknowledge the particularly federal government grant assistance for infrastructure projects, which really helps us with our asset renewal program. But I think, Councillor Purcell, what you've highlighted is the importance of those financial sustainability criteria as we move through our ongoing budget and financial plans.
Follow up there, Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Asset renewable of 150%, would any of our comparable councils ever get to that sort of figure? It's, I would have thought, large rural councils would find it very difficult. Do we know what our neighbours and other councillors' sort of asset renewable percentage is?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I'll come back, and I just quickly grabbed that off our finance manager's email that came around, but because I thought it was 100%, so I'll double check and we'll come back to council on that one. But I would have thought highly unlikely.
Thank you. Mr. Ledden, any further questions for item 15? Okay, I'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Purcell's moved. Councillor Dugas seconded. Councillor Purcell.
Look, it's a good committee, well run. Congratulate all involved, and it does show how strong our council is. So happy to move that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Dugas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, being on that Audit and Risk Committee, the Audit and Risk Management Committee, I find it interesting, and the fact that being on it and being one to ask difficult or strange questions, it's good to get answers from those whose profession it is to be auditors.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Dugas. No other commentary, councillors. Okay, I'll put that straight to the vote in item 15. All those in favour? Is carried 7-0. Item 16, which is the Mayor and Councillors' report, which highlights the different meetings that Mayor and myself and councillors have attended since the previous meeting. Do councillors have any questions arising from that report there? No? Okay. No questions. We'll keep moving. We've dealt with item 17. So we'll move on to general matters. Do councillors have any general matters?
Can't I put my item 17 up again for 2 out of 3?
I don't believe that is available to be done within the governance rules, Councillor Dugas. General matters. Do you have any general matters, councillors? Yes, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of upcoming events that I'd like to promote. Hopefully they should be able to go ahead. The Port Fairy Marathon is on the 14th of November. you can do a 5, 10 or a half marathon, which I don't know, I think that's 21 Ks or the full marathon. So I believe all councillors are doing that this year. Also the Port Fairy, you can just buy a t-shirt. The Port Fairy Adventure Film Festival is also on the 22nd to the 28th of November. So amazing events that are coming up. So get around those. It's just great that there's events coming up. So, and also a big shout out to Southwest Healthcare for their COVID response lately, and Warrnambool District and Moyne. I think the response to the outbreak and how quick, hopefully, fingers crossed, how quick hopefully that has been contained. I think the testing, one, that people went and did, but how quickly they were set up, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So just a big shout out to Southwest Healthcare and all the residents of Warrnambool and Moyne. Whilst they're a different shire, we're one big region and one big happy family, hopefully. So I think everyone keep doing what we need to, and hopefully we can get through this. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Lockett. Thanks for those comments. Would any other councillor like to add to the general matters? Rightio. We'll keep on cracking. Thank you. Item 19, urgent business. None listed. Item 20 is the CEO meeting schedule and activities report. Mr. Millard, would you like to introduce this one? Thanks.
I think, Mayor, take it as read, and happy to answer any question on those meetings or any matters in the report or any other matters of council interest.
All right, thanks, Mr. Millard. We'll first of all see if there's any questions regarding the meeting schedule. Yes, Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. On September the 9th, the Barwon Southwest COVID-19 Regional Coordinators meeting, an update on that meeting, but also an update on the COVID situation that has unfolded over the last couple of days, and how we're going to go about handling the COVID situation and protect our staff and community.
Through you, Mayor, thanks, Councillor Purcell. Perhaps you'll see through that meeting list there's multiple COVID-related meetings. I guess as CEO, my meetings tend to be, with the leadership in other organisations. We have officers meetings, there's emergency management groups, there's response teams, etc., etc. The Barwon Southwest one is more, those regional matters and how we're operating regionally and what things need to change effectively in a response sense. In fact, there's one started at 4:30 today, which I'll probably could be in a bit later. So they're ongoing, but really around managing outbreaks and issues that arise. A lot of, I guess, the health authorities seeking council support through comms and engagement, talking to our own communities and making sure we're responding locally as best we can, Councillor Purcell. On the other aspects you raise, internally, we've been grappling with the roadmap and the implications of vaccine mandates. Effectively, the bulk of our workers are authorised workers. Clearly, those caught up in education, construction, ports, so on. But most of our workers are authorised workers. The mandate currently is that by October 15, authorised workers need to have received a first dose of the vaccine or have proof of that by 29th of October. And by the 26th of November, all authorised worker employees have to have both vaccinations. So we're trying to manage that with all our staff. And then I think beyond that, there's those other elements of council, particularly around, council meetings, CEC committees topical today, township meetings, committee meetings, local meetings. We're involved in a lot of engagement at the local level, involving generally our preferred method being face-to-face. So how we manage that under the new circumstances, we're probably still grappling with, Councillor Purcell.
Thank you. Any other questions on the meetings? Rightio. Move on to the CEO activities report. A good summary there of roughly 47 pages of what's happening within the Shire since the previous meeting. Do you have any questions arising from that report to Mr. Millard? Yes, we do, from Councillor Dukas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Millard, the Hawkesdale Wind Farm, do you know much about the appeal process? I believe he's taken place.
Through you, Mayor, I'd probably defer to Ms. Granger on those specific matters, if that's okay, Mayor.
Ms. Granger, are you happy to take that one?
Yeah, I would need some further clarification from Councillor Dukas as to what appeal process he's talking about.
The court case for the Hawkesdale Wind Farm. That was only finalised a few months ago or a month ago.
Okay, Ms. Granger.
Yeah, so from Council's perspective, we're not a party to the court case. We have seen the result. We're not aware if it has been appealed at this stage or that there's been a hearing in relation to costs or anything further.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Millard? Oh yes, Mr. Miller has a question from Councillor Purcell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just in regard to the Abbeylee Strategic Development and Investment Plan, it's fallen over because it was looking for more commitment. Is that something that we, more financial commitment that we could assist with if we, or would it help if council contributed more to that? Was that one of the major reasons that fell over?
Yeah, Mr. Ledden, happy to take that.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Councillor Purcell, yeah, I think the expression of interest was throwing the hat in the ring. So we're going to revisit that, and I think that will come in for a chat.
Thank you. Councillor Gleeson, any question?
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Millard, in your report, particularly right at the start, you're focusing on gender equality. How are we tracking in that regard as far as our staffing?
Thanks, thanks, Councillor Gleeson. Through you, Mayor. I think pretty good. We're trying to get the. We have a range of requirements and timeframes that we're working with, Councillor Gleeson. We have an internal working group which I chair. We're making good progress across the organisation as far as the way we're incorporating Gender Equality Act requirements into our processes. So I think we're making good progress. It's a heavy load, and some of that has been extended. The requirements have been extended, but yeah, we'll continue at it and continue moving our message forward in a positive way. But I'm pretty comfortable with where it's at the moment.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Millard? Yep, Councillor Dukas.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Salt Creek Wind Farm, there's meant to be testing going on, etc., to do with legal challenges or legal requirements. Has that testing been finalised?
Ms. Granger, you happy to take that one?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. The nuisance investigation is underway. Noise monitoring concluded last Monday, and the consultant that has been employed to investigate the nuisance was in the area and was interviewing the complainants. So that investigation results should come back to you for a November workshop.
Okay, thank you. I've got some more, Mr. Mayor, if I can keep going, unless someone else wants to go ahead of me.
I'll go after you then. You go.
The Moyne Planning Scheme Planning Policy Framework Translation. Does Mr. Millard, or I suppose through you, Mr. Millard, to Ms. Granger, what's that all about?
So are you happy that I take that?
Yep, Ms. Granger.
Okay, so through you, Mayor. the state government has announced that it is changing the way the planning policy framework sits within the planning scheme between the state, regional and local planning policies, and they're streamlining it. We're one of the last councils to have completed that project, and Ms Olsen is working with a consultant and DELP to have that underway, but we're making sure we put the time and effort to ensure we don't lose the intent of our local policies, but it's a translation of what's existing into a new format.
Thank you. The other, it's all planning. VC 196 is to do with, I think, the resources, etc. In this document, we've got a link that goes forever. Can someone send a link that we can just push a button and download that report? Or can someone print it off for next workshop and put it in our envelopes?
Ms Granger?
Yeah, we will print it off and put it in your workshop papers. It's not, like all planning things, it's not a simple document, a one-pager for you.
No, but doesn't, at least we got some reading. It's better than television, I think. And the other one was too, I spoke earlier about the new provisions for no planning permit required for homes or worker accommodation in the farming zone. If we can get an update on that at next workshop, it'd be great too.
Take that on notice.
Thank you.
Thank you. And can I ask another one, Mr. Mayor, that come from our CEC meeting? Councillor Smith can help me out here, but at the CEC meeting, they asked if we could ask council and you as mayor and the CEO to make some statement in regard to realliance. Now, we've discussed it many times at workshop, and it's even more pertinent now because on their website, it's got a heading called Moyne Region Wind Farm Farming Community Fund, where they talk about Moyne, and advisory members include the mayor or delegate and the CEO. So when people read this, they're thinking about, hang on, we're wholeheartedly involved with this community, which I believe isn't the case.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dugas. Yes, I've had no involvement with that particular committee. Wasn't aware that the mayor from Moyne was listed on that committee as being involved. And I think Mr. Miller's in the same boat. And with regard to
something, sorry, but we need to do something to alleviate the fears of the community, because it's not a good read. I know we've got no involvement, but people who don't know that we don't have any involvement. We need to come out and make a strong statement.
Councillor Smith, to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, it was quite embarrassing for Councillor Dukas and I at the meeting at the Mortlake CEC. We just, Des Moines, as Councillor Dukas said, and we just weren't aware of what was happening. So it'd be good to get some clarification. But I'm just wondering whether they're using the term Moyne as a general area and probably not specifically the Shire. That's the only way I can think of it. Yeah, but it is left us out a bit on a limb there last couple of weeks ago. So it'd be good to get a clarification on it, whether we're in it or out of it, or whether we aren't being told.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. I guess, you know, we can't control what they print in their own documents, but certainly, Mr. Miller, if you'd like to add anything, we've had no involvement in it.
We'll take that one on notice and respond to the council. We'll have a chat with them offline.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Smith with a question.
Yeah, just on the Mortlake Avenue of Honour, how's it progressing? People are saying to me, what's happening? There's still limbs falling down. I see on page 37 that they've purchased a whole moat, but they're putting an application in. Could we just get might be a question on notice, but where we're at with that, and when are some of the trees that are dropping limbs likely to come down?
I'm guessing maybe Mr. Gibson might be best placed for that one.
Take that on notice.
Thank you. Yep, take that on notice.
Mr. Mayor, couple more.
All right. Go for it, Councillor Dukas.
Yeah, well,
I'll come to mine.
we're not on a 40-hour week. Council Community Carbon Offset Program, it talks about Basalt to Bay and a 5-person steering committee. Where will those 5 people come from? Would they be Basalt to Bay council officers or members of the public as well?
I think
Take that on notice.
Mr. Gibson, best
Yeah,
place to
no, that's all right.
Happy to
That's
take
okay.
that on notice for
Yeah,
you.
I don't expect them to. The Avenue of Honour, as Mr. Smith, Councillor Smith alluded to, a sufficient quantity of home oak trees. Are they native to Australia?
Mr. Gibson,
Take that on notice.
we're shaking his head.
Through you, Mayor, I can answer that. No.
No. Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dukas. Mr. Millard, I'll ask one. I think, as spoken about earlier, Council would be enthusiastic to write an advocacy letter to the state government and opposition asking for the reinstatement of the cattle underpass program support, which a lot of ratepayers within Moyne have taken up over the years when it was available. And of course, council offer a up to $10,000 contribution to cattle underpasses, as they see it's a important way to improve the safety of our roads, but also assist our farmers with being able to access both sides of the road. So, you know, obviously it's a massive cost to construct an underpass. So without that state government support facilitated through the VFF, it makes it very difficult. So I wonder if we might be able to draft a letter of advocacy to that effect, please, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. We can do that to the government and the opposition.
Thanks. And just like to add, but just like to acknowledge the contributions made by members of the public in appreciation, words of appreciation at the end of your report there, several there. So I know that council does receive feedback, generally constructive, but it's also good to see some really positive feedback there on the back. So we appreciate those from those correspondents. Is there anything final for Mr. Millard from the CEO activities report? All right, that being the case, we will declare the meeting closed at 5:01 p.m. Thank you very much.